Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty or justice for all. If I can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bergman?
Present.
Commissioner Marsters?
Present.
Commissioner Harper Pedersen?
Present.
Vice Chair Gutierrez?
Present.
Chair Silberman?
Present. So the next item on the agenda is appointment of officers, but don't I need to do public comment first?
This is a separate agenda item, so you can ask for public comment on this particular item, and then you can move on to the general public comment later.
Okay. Before we discuss appointment of officers, does any member of the public wish to be heard on appointment of officers? I have no speaker slips. Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion to elect a planning commission chair.
Are you taking nominations?
I am.
Okay. I nominate Jesse.
Okay, we have a nomination for Jesse. Are there any other nominations? All right. All in favor of Jesse being chair, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Congratulations, Jesse.
Congratulations,
I almost said no.
Commissioner Gutierrez. Yeah, I heard that.
I will entertain a nomination for the Planning Commission Vice Chair.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Bergman.
All right. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of the nomination of Ms. Bergman to be Vice Chair, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay. And now, are there any nominations for Design Review Committee Chair?
I nominate Commissioner Marsters.
And I'd like to nominate Commissioner Silberman, as he is the only one of us who has not served on RDRC, chaired that.
All right. Scott, you want to do it? Would you like to do it again?
No.
No? Anybody else want to do it?
Dave, you haven't lived until you chair the RDRC, trust me.
I was thinking of maybe doing it next year. Anybody want to do it again?
If my work schedule worked out, I would. I actually really enjoyed it, but I just
right.
can't make that happen this time.
All right. Do you want to withdraw your nomination of Scott?
I withdraw my nomination of Scott Marsters.
All right. Everybody in favor of the nomination of me indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain, but it passes anyway. All right. Moving on.
And through the chair, if I may, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to you and Vice Chair Gutierrez for your service as chair and vice chair on the Planning Commission for this past year. And these refreshments are for you to enjoy throughout the evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is public comment. This comment period is for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to speak to an item that's on the agenda, you'll be given an opportunity during that agenda item. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Is there anyone who is here to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? All right, seeing none. I am going to ask whether folks have had an opportunity to review the draft minutes and whether anyone has any recommended changes. These are the minutes of the May 4th Planning Commission meeting, as well as the June 1st Planning Commission meeting. So let's start with the May 4th. Does anyone have any changes for the May 4th meeting minutes?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
On page 3, under motion, it says the motion passed 4-0. There were 5 of us there. Commissioner Harper Pedersen dissenting, so it should be a 4-1, not a 4-0.
That is correct. Any other requested changes to the May 4th, 2015 minutes?
I don't have anything.
I don't have anything.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes with the change suggested by Commissioner Marsters.
I move approval of the May 4th, 2015 Planning Commission minutes with the change specified.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay. All right, any suggested changes to the June 1st, 2015 minutes?
I did not have any changes.
Anyone else?
No, and I plan on abstaining from them. I wasn't here.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain too.
You can vote on them if you want, but that's fine. All right, is there a motion to approve the June 1st, 2015 minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
All right, it passes 3-0 with 2 abstentions. All right, so moving on to item 7A, 171 Coronado. At the conclusion of this matter on June 1st, we moved to close the public hearing. I would entertain a motion to reopen the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, so I'm going to briefly describe to those in the audience the procedure for the public hearing. I'm sorry if you've read it already. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, et cetera, on the application, followed with staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The Commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers should fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary prior to addressing the Commission. The speaker should come up to the microphone to speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. And I would observe that I have 5 speaker slips for this project. If you would like to speak, we would greatly appreciate it if you do fill out a speaker slip. I believe they're located against the back wall. It would make our job a lot easier. So with that, does staff have a presentation?
We do, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Andrea Martisich, and I'll be presenting this item this evening. The item before you is a request for design review approval to construct a new 3,911 square foot residence at 171 Coronado. The entitlements requested include a waiver for the overall height requirement, a variance from the natural state requirement, a variance from the downhill building face requirement, a grading and dirt haul certificate, and a tree removal permit. And as you mentioned, this item was continued from the June 1st meeting. Also present tonight to answer any technical questions are the city engineer, Grace Lee, and the building official, Chris Valley. The applicant's team is also here and consists of architects Ryan Morris, Ray Viotti, and their engineer, Travis Lutz. I need, Oh, there we go. So here's a site plan that you saw at the last meeting. Again, this demonstrates the footprint of the residence. You'll notice the garage at the front, 5 feet 2 inches from the front property line, and the driveway that extends across the front of the property, exiting on the west side. And this is an aerial photo of the site. The property is outlined in red. And again, you can see the property in relation to the neighborhood. So a summary of the Planning Commission meeting from June 1st. At the meeting, the Planning Commission heard the staff report as well as the applicant presentation and heard the request for the aforementioned entitlements. Several neighbors expressed concerns and the applicant also tried to respond to as many questions as possible. The Planning Commission specifically expressed concern with 3 aspects of the proposal and directed the applicant and staff to return with additional information with regard to these areas. The first was in regards to a waiver that the applicant was requesting from the overall height requirement. The applicant was asking to have a waiver for an additional 3.5 feet in height, and the Planning Commission asked for a shadow study to determine the shading impact of that additional 3.5 feet on the downhill residences, specifically those across the street. Second, the Commission requested additional information regarding the driveway location. And finally, the Commission asked staff to follow up on concerns expressed by neighbors regarding grading and road conditions. So to start with the waiver request, as you are aware, the applicants are requesting a waiver to increase the overall height by 3.5 feet, which would raise the overall height to 38 feet, 5 inches as measured from the lowest point on the site to the highest. And on this slide, the red line indicates the maximum 35-foot height. The clouded areas are the areas that exceed that height limit and the reason for the request of the waiver. The line weights are a little bit light, so it's a bit difficult to see, but it's that area within the 2 clouds. As you can see, the area that extends past the maximum height is solely roof area. And as I mentioned, the Commission asked to see a shadow study to see what impact this would create. The applicant will be presenting on this a little bit more, but I just wanted to show a few different slides with this. This one specifically is the date, December 21st, and time 9 a.m. where the shadow is the longest. The picture on the left is the flat roof, so were it to stay at 35 feet maximum allowed height, and the one on the right is the sloped roof. I clouded the areas where there's a difference, and as you can see, there's not much of one. It's a pretty minimal difference between the 2. As I mentioned, the applicant will go through other times of the year and times of the day. And staff's of the opinion that the slope roofs would provide more architectural interest than the flat roofs, and is recommending approval of the waiver to allow this additional height, given that the shadows casted by it are pretty minimal compared to what is allowed. In terms of the driveway configuration, the location of the driveway was reviewed with both Public Works and Fire. Public Works prepared a memo for the Commission, which is available on the dais and was also over there for anyone in the public who would like to see it. No objections were brought up with regard to the location of the driveway. Public Works noted that the location of the driveway is no more dangerous than other locations or existing driveways within the neighborhood. In addition, all vehicles exiting driveways need to take caution and make sure conditions are clear for exiting regardless of the driveway location. Although not required by the city, the applicant could provide a backup area which would allow the car to exit face forward. In addition, there's no parking on the street, which will help with visibility. As you are aware, the applicant is also proposing to remove several trees, some of those between the property at 171 Coronado, the subject site, and 181 Coronado. Removal of those trees would allow for greater visibility as cars proceed down the hill towards the street. Alternatively, the Planning Commission can require the garage to be located along the west portion of the lot, with the exit at the east or another alternative. If this is desired, more analysis would need to be done to determine where the driveway could exit and still maintain the 18% slope. The applicant is prepared a rendering showing the visual effects of relocating the driveway and will present on that shortly. There are several items in terms of clarification and with grading and also the dirt haul routes. A few things I wanted to bring up. Based on review of the concerns and then amongst discussion with the different departments, staff is proposing some changes to some of the conditions in the grading and dirt haul permit. The revised permit is at the dais and the changes are in blue. I'm going to go through each of those. First is changing the dirt haul route to specify the difference between empty and full trucks and the route that each will take. The updated route will ensure that trucks do not need to turn around on the street or on site, which was a concern, and I will review the route shortly. Condition number 18 has been removed, as condition 27A and C have been revised to allow more discretion for the city in terms of what measures are taken to control dust as well as clean up roadways. Condition 28 has been revised to require the pre and post construction survey to include from the site itself along Coronado to Windsor and Devonshire. And this isn't with regard specifically to damage that any equipment might cause the roads. Pre-construction survey would be required, as well as a post-construction survey, so that the city may determine what damage was caused by the project and have that be repaired prior to any building division final. And then the last condition, number 29, has been added, which would require all people along the dirt haul route to be notified 10 days prior to commencement of any grading or dirt haul activities. And then another new condition was to limit, we talked last time about limiting the truck size and allowing Public Works to determine the truck size. And we've also added a condition to limit the truck to 10 wheels or less, which was a similar condition as required for 151 Coronado next door. And in terms of figuring out the exact size of the truck, it's a bit difficult to do now until the full grading plans are submitted. So in terms of the proposed route and entering the site, you can see here this is off 101, and the intent of the revised route is that the trucks entering and exiting are going in a circular route rather than stopping at the site and backing up or using other neighbors to get their trucks turned around. So you can see coming into the site here, and then going out would be the route that was proposed before, going down to Devonshire, San Carlos Avenue. You'll notice specifically that in the route to get to 101, it goes down Britain and Industrial and does not go on Holly except to get on to 101. The applicant also proposed agreed to several conditions in response to the concerns, specifically limited construction hours, limited grading and dirt haul hours, limiting the height of the trees to the rear so that the rear neighbor's view will not be blocked. The applicant is also adding trees to the right of the property to help with privacy for the neighbor to the right. And the applicant's also proposing a revised landscape plan, which is up at the dais as well. And that is different than the last landscape plan you saw June 1st. And I'll have the applicant go over that a bit more, but it does include additional oaks being planted, which was another concern. And prior to closing, I just wanted to mention that we received 3 emails, which came after a distribution of the staff report, all of which were provided to the commission and are included as part of the administrative record. And staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve several entitlements, including the code compliance certificate for design review, which includes the request for the exception for the garage setback and window trim, a waiver to exceed the overall height requirement, variances for the natural state and downhill building face, the tree removal permit, and the grading and dirt haul certificate. Should you choose to approve this item, this is the formal motion you would make. I'm available for any questions, as is the applicant. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for staff at this particular moment?
Not at this moment.
No.
And through the chair, if you'd like to wait until the applicant presents his presentation, we can take questions thereafter as well.
That's fine. Okay, does the applicant have a presentation?
So just click this to go forward.
Thank you, Andrea. My name is Ryan Morris. I'm the project architect for this, working with Ray Viotti at Viotti Architects, as Andrea mentioned. So since a couple of you weren't here last time, I just want to quickly talk about some of the challenges of this property that will give more clarity to some of the decisions that we'll talk about in a minute. So this particular site is one of the more challenging I've dealt with a 62% average slope. And as you can see on this diagram, the property line is above the street. That's the boldest red line on the left by about 9 or 10 feet. And so you're not even walking on the property until you've hiked up the hill 9 feet and inward from the street about 10 feet. And the garage setback, the 5-foot garage setback, which is the second red line from the left, is an additional 5 feet vertically above the property line. So if you were looking at this site without any development, just to start building, you have to climb upward over 15 feet to build a property on top of grade. So that's not realistic with the access challenges that we have of getting a required two-car garage and the driveway, which has been the sensitive topic on this project. So as you can see, most of the house, of the lower 2 floors, are going to be below grade, below existing grade. And that's primarily due to the garage location. The steepest driveway we can get up from the street is 18% slope, and coming from either direction, we'll see on another slide that the location of the garage is dictated by the steepness of the driveway, and working up from there, from the foot of the garage, you will arrive at your maximum building height. And we're constrained by those height limits and the starting point above the street. Furthermore, there are building setbacks for the first and second floor, which are more inward from the property line and further up the hillside. So it's continually pushing our building mass higher up and farther away from the street. We've done our best to minimize the massing of this structure. That was one of our primary goals, is to keep it from being a bulky, looming mass hovering over the street, and gently step it up the hillside as much as we could. You can see the retaining walls that are below grade are stepped, and the front of the house as well, from the garage to the first floor to the second floor. We're trying to move it back up the hillside and break up the massing, articulate it. It was asked at the last hearing that we do a sun study because of the building height and the waiver that we're requesting. So following is going to be about 16 slides. I'm going to go through them quickly. The first 8 will be in the spring when the sun's higher and the shadows are not as exaggerated. And the last 8 will be December 21st, the winter solstice, which is the lowest sun angle of the year. So it's the most extreme sun angle. And you'll see 4 different times of the day in the morning, from 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11, and 12 noon at each of those time periods, and we'll compare the sloped roof and the flat roof. So as I said, this is March in the morning. To orient yourself, the sun rises on the top right corner of this diagram, and it continues downward on the page to the bottom right, from east to west, and south side is on the right side of this image. And you can see the shadows moving across to the right. And now we're doing the same time of year with a flat roof. Okay, I'll go back and do that one more time. It kind of helps to go quickly. You can see the sun moving. Not much different. Here's December 21st. As Andrea said, this is at 9 a.m. There are shadows being cast on the building across the street. This is with a sloped roof, as we've proposed. 10 a.m., 11, and 12. And I'll go back and point out on the neighboring building, it's covering the front door, partial side of the elevation closest to the street. At 10 a.m., the highest point of the shadow is about at the bottom of the front door. That line below the roof represents the first floor. And at 11, this is down at the level below the street, the shadow that's hitting the building. You can see the sloped roofs pretty clearly here. And then at the flat roof, same shadows being cast across the front door of the neighboring building. Shadows don't quite touch the bottom of the front door. And then they disappear. And there's the clear definition of the flat roof. And I'll go through that quickly again, just for fun. Okay, so here's a picture of the neighboring building, and you can see that below the street level, there are no windows facing the street. So, and you see the front door on the left side there. We think this is a pretty minimal impact to this building, being at in the winter, those few months or weeks, however long that may be, when the sun angle's at its steepest or its most severe. It's not really affecting a whole lot of their interior spaces, and for that matter, the difference between a flat roof and a sloped roof we think is negligible. And I think that's the reason that this whole question came up, was to see if we did not need the waiver for the sloped roof, if we could benefit, if the neighbors could benefit from a flat roof. And I don't think that there's enough difference to make that case. Another question that came up at the last meeting was whether the building height will block views from the neighbor above our house. And as you see on the next image, the highest peak of our proposed roof at 171 is at least 20 feet below the deck of the property above us. No views are affected, and there's the exact measurements. We've also planted trees, which were a concern, and the highest tree, the roots are, or the base of the tree is planted at 153, slightly below the roof peak. So you'll see here, there's a measurement that's hard to read, but the distance is not important. What you'll want to see is just how high above the roof the neighboring building is above the roof of 171. And any trees would be planted at the roof peak or below. Driveway location. We'll deal with this in several separate, we'll study several separate aspects of the driveway. One topic that came up was the separation between the two driveways at 171 and 181 Coronado. The separation that we measured after the meeting was almost 7 feet. It's about 6'10". Both driveways, as they enter the street, start out almost parallel to the street, but when the curb cut happens at the street curb, they're pretty much perpendicular to the street. So it's not like the cars are running into each other. Furthermore, there's a fire hydrant and mailbox in between the two properties, and a retaining wall that's set back from the street curb about 4 or 5 feet. It was asked if we could provide bollards to prevent hitting the fire hydrant from our side of the driveway, and we're perfectly happy to do that. And then the sight line from the driveway of 171 Coronado looking west towards the curved road that has been a sensitive topic. Our property actually benefits from the retaining wall being pulled away from the street curb. Gives us more room to see towards that curved road, over the top of the fire hydrant and past the mailbox. Here's 2 photos of that driveway at 181 Coronado, and our proposed driveway would be on the left side of that yellow retaining wall, and the area where the fire hydrant and mailbox are being left untouched. Since we're looking at it, this image also shows an oak tree, which is about 11 feet to the east of the corner of our property, and there's a wooden stake above the yellow retaining wall just to the left of the mailbox, which represents the corner of our property. So I think that there was question about whose property the tree was on, and I think you can clearly see that it's in the frontage of 171 Coronado. It does overhang the driveway of 181, as you can see on the picture on the right, so I'm sure they enjoy some shade from that. And we are going to replace this tree with 6 more oak trees 4 of which are on the property line border between 171 and 181. The curved street, the road curves, Coronado Avenue curves from the west of 171, and it straightens out at 171. So our property is not on the curve, it's after the curve. And we have provided adequate stopping area on our driveway on 171 in order for our clients to stop, watch for traffic, as I said, to look past the fire hydrant towards the curved road. We're not aware of any San Carlos city standards that would require a different driveway design than what we've provided, or a specific sightline distance from the curve to the driveway. And we received an email today that said Public Works has no safety concerns for this driveway location. Because this is sensitive, I'd like to point out that I don't think our driveway is contributing to the traffic safety issues. It seems like a pre-existing problem of this sharp corner, and other driveways exiting and entering into the street, and it seems like this could be solved by speed limit reduction, signs, sidewalks, other things that would benefit all neighbors, not just our neighbor. I think this Planning Commission hearing has given everyone the opportunity to bring up the safety concerns, but I don't think we are increasing any risk with the location of our driveway. This is the same diagram that Andrea had put up. It shows about 7 feet between 171 and 181.
Where would you, if you moved the driveway, where would you put it?
The only other option we have would be to basically flip it so that it's starting where the little walkway with steps is on the left side of our property and veering up towards the right of the page. Because of the steepness of this hillside, we need a run of driveway in order to gain height. We can't just have a short 10-foot long driveway. We need a good amount of, we need a little running head start to get up to our house. So the only two options that we see are starting as it's shown or flipping it.
So where you say instead of it's coming down and it's close to 181, it'd actually be on the left-hand side and then going up that way, right?
Yeah, I can jump ahead to a slide if you'd like to see an example.
Sure.
Here's an early model we did when we did look at both driveway locations. This is a little exaggerated because where this driveway hits the street is actually where there's an existing street light. So if we did do this, the driveway would need to be even shorter than this.
So, I was not present, so, but I would just ask the question, why wouldn't you, if there's if it's all the same to you, but the neighbors care that it's flipped, why wouldn't you flip it?
Good question.
Yeah.
I've prepared
Okay,
some,
all right.
some answers to that.
Thank you.
First of all, there are 3 ways that we can improve the current design. Sorry, I'm just going in the order of my slides. We'll come back to it. We can move the house 18 inches to the east. It is not right up against either the east or western setback lines, so there is room to slide the entire project 18 inches away from 181. We're happy to do so. I'll show you that on the next slide. It doesn't affect our design at all. The second point is that we can provide a wider turnaround area at the top of our driveway in front of the garage. Technically is not enough for a 3-point turn. It's more like an 18-point turn. Or if you bought a Mini, you could probably do it in less. But that extra room could be beneficial, especially if the third option is done, which we're not in favor of, but I'm just throwing it out there, that we could put a mechanical turntable in the driveway. This is done in San Francisco sometimes for tight garages, and that you'll see right here, I've widened the rectangular gray area in front of the house to be 25 feet by 36 feet. That's option 2 that I discussed. And the turntable, typically they're about 15 or 16 feet, and it's a fancy luxury that we do not think is necessary, but if it's important for the Planning Commission that our clients face forward when they're exiting their driveway, it is possible.
You're not explaining why you wouldn't just flip it.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that at the last hearing, I apologize I wasn't there, but it was asked of us why, or whether or not we could face
Possible.
forward.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then also option 1 on the top left, that shows that there's a little bit of room to slide this house to the left. So an alternate driveway location. In our opinion, this increases the garage massing adjacent to the street and defeats the purpose of our current design. As I said in the very beginning, we were trying really hard to keep the massing down on this structure and keep it up the hillside away from the street so it's not looming over the street. As we just looked at, the garage, because of the contours of this site, is actually situated up on the hillside, and you'll have a garage wall facing the street, whereas in the current design, it's completely buried in the hillside. It's more cost the way we have proposed it because it's more excavation, but we much prefer having the garage hidden from sight from the street and only being able to see the top 2 stories of the house from the street. Another reason why we would not do the flipped driveway is because of the street light and a slope easement on the east side of the property restrict the driveway length, and it results in no height advantage for our house. I would very strongly entertain flipping the driveway if we benefited by being able to lift the house up higher and get out of the hillside and do less excavation. But since there's no gain, it gets us to the same elevation because it's a slightly shorter run.
So that was my other question was, usually when we're asked for a variance, there's usually some provision almost for a variance, for a reason for a variance, why we would be likely to grant one. And I'm not really seeing that here. Maybe it's not, maybe I just don't see it as in there. But usually there's some reason other than I want to. So I'm trying to understand, what that might be to get an idea of, why we would want to grant a variance. There needs to be another reason.
What variance are you referring to? There's no different...
The height.
Oh, the height?
Yeah. No, he basically said there's no benefit to height, and I assumed he was talking about the building by flipping the driveway.
No, there's no difference in... They're not asking for... Flipping the driveway doesn't require a different variance. That's...
No, I know the driveway's not... But he talked about height, and there was a variance in here for height, so I assumed that...
The roof.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I guess I'm asking, that was my other question that's not in line with the driveway was, since he talked about that, I wanted to know why he was asking for that variance. What was compelling reason to ask for that height variance?
The height variance is just to provide some a
Building
design feature on the
massing?
roof.
Aesthetic
It's just
design.
it's a
Is it
design
aesthetics?
feature on the roof.
If I could clarify, it's not a variance, it's a waiver.
Waiver, excuse me.
And I think that marks it down a few notches on the importance, but it is aesthetic, breaking up the massing rather than having continual flat roof across the top.
And the code allows the 10%. We have to approve
Okay.
it, but allows the 10%.
All right, that was what I was looking for. Thank you. Okay.
You can continue.
Thanks. The third reason I've listed here is that the current driveway design takes advantage of the property shape, the views from the eastern side, and the yard area, what little we have in the front of the building. If we were to flip the driveway, we would kind of waste the space where the driveway currently is. We would have a more difficult time getting the views that we're looking for towards the bay, and we would have less yard area in the front of the house. So this old rendering does not show the stepped retaining wall at the back of the driveway that's required. A 6-foot maximum retaining wall is allowed, and that's probably 12 to 15 feet tall. So once you start stepping that retaining wall back, there is little to no yard space in front of the building on the left side. You can see the massing of the garage on the right, how it's pretty disjointed from the rest of the house. And what was the other point? Oh, no height advantage. Basically, here's a comparison. With the garage buried on the left side, the articulation of the roof on top, a little bit of yard space on the left side to the left of the garage. I wrote this slide before I received some clarifications that Andrea mentioned, so you can ignore the bottom note. The top note was something written in the staff report about requiring 8 trees, and I would request that we reduce that to 6. We've provided, I apologize, I don't have the numbers with me, but we have provided 4 oak trees along the street, 6 in total. 2 of them are the strawberry trees, and then 4 oak trees along the property line between 171 and 181. We've replaced, so this is the new landscape plan that I'm discussing. We've replaced several of the trees that were considered non-native. The strawberry trees are native, but they're not as recognizable as the oak trees. And we've put in more oaks in order to try and preserve the streetscape for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant at this time?
Just because you were mentioning the landscape plan, I'm looking at what was on the dais in front of us, and this is the new revised landscape plan, correct? So you'll be removing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 trees from the front of the property, correct?
That's correct. I think in total, on the list on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's 11 trees listed, and 10 of those are being removed. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them are only required to be replaced because of diameter.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
Just quickly, did you explore moving the light pole?
I requested information about what process it would take. I found out it does not belong to PG&E. It's a San Carlos streetlight. I don't know what the process involves.
Would that make a difference?
It would help the driveway length. I still don't think it helps the massing of the garage.
Does it help with the views?
It could. It could give us, the further east that we can move the building on the site, the better off we are in terms of views. The garage typically likes to be adjacent to public kitchen and public spaces, and when we flip it, the garage will be on the opposite side of the public spaces no matter what we do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. So I have 5 speaker slips. Did anyone else want to provide me a speaker slip who hasn't already? All right. So I'm going to begin with Nora Woodring.
Good evening. My name is Nora Woodring, and I live with my children and my husband in 162 Coronado Avenue. That's the home that will be impacted the most as far as the light is concerned. When I saw the report on that was back there provided. I saw the shadow study. Now, the shadow study on the paper, on the report itself, it doesn't look like it's that bad. But when I saw the when the slides here and how that shadow moved, it got kind of scary for me. So I would like to see that shadow moving again. Is there any way we can relook at the way that the shadow moves?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So that's receding afternoon. And then, so you see, I cannot interpret this report, and I cannot interpret what's going on there other than the fact that it's kind of, it does look like it's impacting my property quite a bit. I don't know for how many hours of the day it would be doing it. There is no comparison as what it is right now without the building there at all, even though there is a real, steep grade right now. So I'm sure the sun is impacted by that grade that is there right now. And then there is also no comparison of what it would be with the 3.5 foot difference. I think it's 3.5 feet difference with the variance that you guys are requesting, right? So.
Yeah, so they actually showed that, and you can show it again, but there's really no appreciable difference with the 3.5 feet.
So you're saying between the flat roof and the slope roof, so that's the difference in the 3.5 feet?
Yeah, so they're entitled as of right to build 35 feet, which is
Right.
why we wanted to see what the additional 3.5 feet, how that impacted your home.
Sure.
And based on the study that they did, it indicates that 3.5 feet has no appreciable impact on your home. I mean, when you look at the comparison slides, I mean, I can see like a little jagged edge difference, and it also looks like we're really only, and I'm not trying to minimize it, it obviously affects you, but based on looking at the slides, it looks like the shadow is only going to be directly on your house about an hour a day in the winter.
Okay.
And that's about it.
And who determined this? I mean, I know VOT is going to be on the side of the applicant. And does the Planning Commission review it and say there really is no appreciable blocking of the light at all?
Well, I mean, we did. I mean, we're looking at the slides. If you're asking whether we're independently evaluating the quality of their study, presumably staff is doing that. We don't have the capability to do that. But if you start from the proposition that they've done their study correctly, we can look at the slides and say that there's no appreciable difference by the additional 3.5 feet, and that the amount of shadow on your property, on your home. Like if you had a garden in the front, I mean, I think that would be more of a concern because it would be on your garden for a significant period of time. But when we're just talking about the shadow on your house, it appears like there's no real shadow on your house except an hour a day, maybe 2, but only in the winter. And none of it's caused by the additional 3.5 feet. Any of it's caused by the 35 feet, which they're entitled to under the code.
Okay. And you see, I cannot go by your guys' word, so I guess I'm going to have someone independently look at it so that I feel better about it. I don't feel good about it when I see that shadow creeping up like that. Now, I'm sure you guys have studied this and have seen this kind of thing before, but I have not.
Can staff speak to the validity of the report at all and how we would have verified the validity of it?
The Planning Commission's request at the last hearing was that the applicants, consisting of the licensed architects, prepare a shadow study. They have done that. Architects are often tasked with preparing shadow studies. They're licensed architects. We have no reason to believe that their study was prepared by someone who wasn't equipped with the capabilities to do it. So that would be our response.
Did we have any peer review at the city level?
We did not have any peer review of the shadow study.
Okay.
Is that possible to do, or is that not possible at all, the peer review at the city level?
I think we could probably ask for it. I would ask staff to comment. I mean, on other things, I know we've had peer review. Is it possible to have that peer reviewed?
At this point, this wouldn't be something that staff would recommend. However, if the commission, all of you are requesting such a peer review, you can do that.
Okay, I understand. All right. Thank you.
My concern is that we are pretty much the only home. I don't think the one next door to us gets impacted like we do. So that's my concern. There's nobody else that's going to speak to this problem other than myself. So just to let you know, that's one issue I have with it, and maybe I'll be okay with it. I find nothing wrong with it being developed. I really like the idea of somebody coming in there. I think it's great for our neighborhood. The other thing is the bollard, I can't even say it, I don't know how you say it, but that is something that I really would like there. And that's that thing, you know, that post that is there to obstruct any kind of damage to that fire hydrant, because I did say in the previous council meeting that this house that I live in right now, I only moved 3 months ago into it, but back in 2007, water did discharge in great amounts from that fire hydrant, and it did impact the foundation of the home, and it had to be strengthened for about at the tune of $256,000. The other thing I do want to comment on is the sharp corner. I don't care what Public Works says, okay? It's not wise. You guys can make the decision you guys are going to make, but there's no wisdom in what's happening as far as aggravating. I know that the architect spoke as to there being a pre-existing problem, but that will only be an aggravant. It will aggravate the problem that is there right now. And that's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Peters?
Good evening. Roel Peters, owner of 152 Coronado, so the house right next door. Two questions or two concerns that I had. One actually having to do with the shadow study. What I didn't see is it stopped at 12 noontime, and the shadow study seems to have focused on the house right in front of the property. Well, I'm the one right, if you look at that picture, up to the right there. And my concern is that as the sun turns, it actually, the shadow will elongate and onto my property. The hill at that point also comes down, so it's no longer protected by the hill at that site. So what I would have liked to see is not just showing it between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. I would really have liked to see till 2, 3 o'clock or 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. So that it actually can show what my front yard is going to look like, which is a concern that I voiced in last meeting. Okay, so that would be my first concern on the shadow study. My second concern is related to comments that are made around the location of these garages, and one being quote unquote buried in the hill, and you're not going to see it. The other one more up there. The question is, there's no such thing as this will be buried in the hill. And I think we're just going through this with 151 Coronado, which is, this hill is about to come down. Yeah, meaning it's so steep you can't even put a house and then assume that the landscaping is just going to hold everything in place. And building can actually talk to this, but there's a plan to actually put a retaining wall all across 151 Coronado. Yeah, 12 feet retaining wall. So the same is going to have to happen on 171. It's not shown, but that's the reality. Yeah, you cannot have a 10 foot up or 15 foot up just buried over a distance of 10 feet. You're not going to maintain that 60-degree slope when you're building a garage right behind it. As already was done by 151, what happens? They just take away everything that's there, and it's an opening. Yeah, when they're excavating this. Because you cannot excavate 12 feet down with just a sliver of earth. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So what's going to happen? They're just going to excavate the whole thing, and then put the garage there. And now we're going to say you get this wall, which is up to grade level is 10 feet, and then up to the garage another 12 feet. So now you're going to have this 22 foot that you're now going to fill in with earth. Well, there's only one way you fill it in with earth. That's with a retaining wall, step up, step up, step up. Yeah, 6, 6, 6. That's the reality of what's going to end up with that street. Yeah, whether we want it or not, if you put that garage there. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're not just looking at pretty pictures and say, oh, in this case we don't see the garage. No, we're going to see a beautiful retaining wall stepped up, which is the same that's going to happen on 151. So I just want to be realistic there, that what we're seeing, it's not what you see is what you get. That's not what it is here.
Okay. Would the applicant like to respond to those comments?
What was the comment before the retaining wall?
So the first is he's wondering why the shade study didn't go beyond noon, and how is his property going to be shaded, the property to the right?
Yeah, I can only say that I've seen it, but obviously I didn't provide that many slides. We did not see it touch the house, even in the winter. It did go across the driveway. You can take my word for it, but we can provide additional slides if needed.
So you're representing that you did do a study beyond noon?
Yeah, with this model, we have the capability to look at any time, any day.
Okay. And you're saying that the shadiest, during the shadiest time period, which was the winter, it covered, what, half the driveway, you said?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, it's hard to track here, but it's kind of going horizontally. You can see it touching a little bit of the driveway, and then it, as I remember, it swoops up towards the right, but it doesn't go straight vertically. That shadow that's touching his driveway right now, as the sun curves, it kind of makes an arc across the front of his house.
So it does touch his house?
No, across the front of his yard.
Okay. Okay.
And as far as the retaining wall, I'm not sure how they'll build it. I think what our neighbor has said seems very logical, and it will be a challenge to maintain the slope of the hillside in front of the driveway. We're just going to depend on our contractor to achieve that.
Okay. Ms. Lada?
Hello there. I have a couple concerns. The tree height. On the plan, it indicates that on the right side, that's bordering 181. Coronado indicates about 4 trees, oak trees, being replaced. There are no oak trees on the left on the second half of the property towards my property of 41 Elston Court. So what's the height of these live oak trees? It indicates in the plan that it's not going to reach my property line, but I want to know the height. And I want to know if it does grow past it, what are our options? Who's going to trim it? Who's going to pay for it? And how is it going to get executed? So do they have an answer for that? And what
I think that's actually in
Ordinances, right? Isn't that just normal ordinance? If some tree grows on your side of the property, or are you talking about some provisions ahead of time that we're thinking about?
Staff, isn't there something in the approvals that prevents the trees from going above the hill line? I thought I saw something in the approvals. No.
I'm so sorry. Can you clarify where you are in relation?
right here. So there are no trees all here. So on the right side, and they're putting live oak. How tall is the tree going to go?
And where are you?
We're up here.
You're up here. Got it. Okay, thank you.
So I don't want the tree to compromise
Oh,
our...
you don't want it to block your view?
That makes sense.
You don't
Thank
want it to come up and affect your view?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
I mean, I don't have a problem the trees being regrown and replanted, but just why does it have to be blocking my view?
Yeah,
and
I
if it
understand.
does go up a certain height, I want to know who's going to be in charge of trimming, because once all this is said and done, I want to know what my options are.
Condition 21 of the code compliance certificate
Yeah.
provides that no trees shall be allowed to grow above the ridge line for the property line adjacent to 41 Elston Court.
I read that, but I just want to make sure that the...
You want to
They
make sure you're
plan-
not on the hook to
yes.
make sure.
Yes.
And actually, that's a good thing to bring up, because I live up in Crestview, and we have some, homes looking out over the others, and we're always trying to determine does someone want, we call it trimming for view, right? Some people want it trimmed for view, some people don't want to pay for it, some people do want to pay for it, so that's a really legitimate consideration to make sure that, yeah, so I'd want to, when we go to discussion, I'd want to discuss that.
I mean, the code compliance certificate requires that it be done, so it's the property owner who's building the house that has to keep the trees consistent with the code compliance certificate, right?
That's correct.
And then if the trees do grow above that, the neighbor's recourse would be to contact code enforcement, or?
Correct.
Okay.
So we answered that one.
Okay, I understand that, but I just want to make sure, why do we even have to go that route of fighting with our neighbors when they can just plant a tree that won't grow a certain height? I mean, don't you think it's a win-win situation to begin with?
Well, I mean, we can ask the architect, but based on the location of the trees, it seems like the only one that can conceivably be an issue would be the oak that is immediately to the rear of the property. Even that one would have to grow 22 feet in order to just hit the ridge line. So, I mean, you want a slower growing tree than an oak. I think they put in oaks because we were saying we wanted similar trees to the trees they were taking out. So I think they would be happy to put a strawberry tree back there. I don't think we'd have to convince them.
Or move that tree a little below, so the gradient by the time it grows up, you guys are happy, we're happy.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
I think, no, I appreciate that, and we've heard that. I think that the balance is the reason that they're putting those trees is because they heard from the community that they wanted native trees similar to the ones taken out.
Understood.
And the reason that it's located where it is because the neighbor at 181 Coronado wanted to. I mean, so it's a balance, but definitely hear what you're saying.
Thank you. The other question is the structural issues. As our neighbor, one of the other neighbors, 152, mentioned that the hill is not going to withstand. So when all this construction starts happening, they're going to drill, and our house sits right above it. I know it's bedrock, but we have a pool. Vibrations from drilling can crack my foundation. So what options do I have to make sure that my foundation of the house is secure and the foundation of my pool is secure? If I start noticing there's a little crack happening, what options do we have? I want to know that.
I don't know that there's anything we can say. Does staff have a response to that?
The building official is here, and maybe we can have him respond to the requirements that when the construction drawings are prepared, the applicant will be required to provide reports to ensure that the type of foundation and the way that the building is carried out does not impact neighboring properties.
Sure. Okay.
There's reports and there's reality, as our other neighbor mentioned. I just want to make sure that our property and our investment is protected. I don't have a problem them building up their house, but I want to make sure not at my cost.
Sure.
That's my concern. And I want to know what options do we have. If we start noticing a crack in our pool because of the vibration, what actions do we take? Who do we contact? And who's going to pay for the damages that has happened to our property, our foundation? So I need answers to those. That would make me feel better.
Okay.
Thank you. Or if the land is moving and we start seeing our foundation shifting. I mean, houses are not cheap in San Carlos, so I just want to make sure that our investment is protected.
Sure.
And the other concern is, what about the dirt that will fly over? Any construction happens, there's dirt flying. We have a pool, once again. I don't want it to be covered with dirt, and who's going to end up cleaning it? Should we notice it? I'm not saying it will happen, but what if it does? I want to know what my options are and what the solutions are, what the owner has planned for solutions.
Okay.
So will that be answered later, or?
That, I could answer now, but there's, I don't know if you heard earlier, but there's a condition with respect to dust control that gives the city discretion to ensure, to the extent possible, that dust is managed. Beyond that, if you're asking what happens if there's dust in your pool, I can ask staff to respond, but is
there like a dust police that goes by and checks the? I'm just curious, how do you measure it?
Staff wonder how does the
The dust police. Chris is the dust police. Here's our dust police officer. What a title.
Chris Valley, building official. We have measures between the city engineer and me to require, within reason, dust control. Of course, we're in the drought ordinance or drought period right now, so we request people to control their dust, and then we get complaints about water usage. So we're going to find a happy medium there. Regarding the foundation issues and cracks in the foundation and pool, I would strongly at this moment, or at this time, suggest the builder do a survey of this residence, a pre-construction survey, and address every single crack that they note prior, to construction. So there's no
Question
questions.
of when something happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would, not a requirement, but a suggestion.
Well, we can require it, can't we?
You could.
All right, well, there you go.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Des Police. I'm just curious, this is just a general observation. How come the owners of this new property are not here? Because, I mean, supposedly we're the city of good living. I mean, don't they want to work amicably with the other neighbors?
I think they've got staff that are doing that for them.
And the contact information for the foreman in case of an emergency, when is that going to be provided?
We have a condition that requires that before construction begins, is my understanding.
When is the construction beginning?
Well, certainly not until after we approve it, for sure.
Okay. So ETA on it.
When they would, if we approve it, when do they plan on starting construction? I'll ask that question.
Okay, great. That would be it. Thank you.
You got it. All right, Mr. Hahn?
I'm the owner of 181 Coronado. I have been there for 32 years. When I first got the letter from the architects, it was the end of December, beginning of January, and I looked at what this was going to do to my property. Frankly, was appalled. So I went to the meeting, I talked to the architect, the neighbors, this lady that was just up here and her husband were also there. And the 3 points that I had, the major points, and there's a lot of other things with traffic and on and on and on, was the driveway. The driveway abuts right up to the next to mine. I don't care if they really show 7 feet or not, but there's a fire hydrant. There's the retaining wall comes down my driveway, as you can see from one of the pictures, and it comes over about, I guess, about this far. There's a fire hydrant, there's my mailbox and so forth. So I come down the driveway, and my driveway curves a little bit, or the retaining wall does. Come down there, this driveway is coming down there, and there's just no way. And so the planning department put out the June 11th letter saying that, you know, there was going to be basically no effect there, because when they tore out all the trees, which is the second issue that I had brought up at the meeting, I don't want the live oaks that have hung over my property and that I've trimmed on my side of the property for 32 years that give shade and beauty and privacy to my property. I don't want those torn out. And I didn't know on the last meeting whether they were on my property, on the right-of-way, or on 171. So I spent several thousand last week and had my property surveyed. And I'll give them that point. The big tree that overhangs my property, and I don't know if anybody yet has gone out and looked at it. Thank you very much. Somebody has. Is on the right-of-way in front of 171. I still don't want it torn out. Excuse me? Would you like me to sit down then?
Yeah, I think that's
sir,
more.
It's fine.
That's more of a comment to us.
No, sir. It's fine. It's fine.
Keep it at 2 minutes, though. Yeah, I mean, we would shut it down for 2 minutes.
I was giving folks 3 minutes, and
Last one was 5.
all right. I'm sorry. If we could please not have yelling from the back of the audience, I would appreciate it.
So anyway, where was I? So, I discussed this with the architect. The third thing was the windows overlooking my back patio. He said there was a concern on where the driveway came out. Yes, there was a concern about tearing out the trees and so forth and so on. But when he got up here before, I don't know, the concern has gone somewhere else, so I don't know. So I don't want the trees torn out. I don't want a driveway that I have to crisscross to get out. It just really is going to destroy my property. So that's as short as I can make it.
Thank you, sir. Do you think that the rotating mechanical turn is going to help at all?
No, I don't think so. I supposedly have a turnaround at the top of mine, but not a mechanical turnaround, but I have never used it. So I would like the driveway at the other end. That's the only thing that makes sense.
I imagine the 18 inches would help at least a little bit, right?
It would help a little bit, but it's still going to be back out into the traffic. The driveway needs to be at the other end of the property. I mean, that's fairly obvious at this point. So.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask him one real quick question? The oak at the top on the right-hand side, I don't know if you've seen that. If that were replaced with a smaller tree, would that impact your property at all?
I'm not sure which tree you're talking about. The top.
So it's about.
It's up at the top of the property.
Right around there.
Yeah, there is one up there against my oleanders. I mean, it gives me privacy on my back patio, which is what I'm looking for, because the third thing was the windows in this house, and the architect said, well, they could move those around, place them someplace else, and they could alleviate it. But I haven't heard anything back on that either. So, but certainly the privacy of my property is gone.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hanson?
I'll keep this short. My name is Jeff Hansen. I live at 122 Coronado, which is further up the hill, and I've been there since 1978. And I just want to cover a few areas that we're talking about a driveway here with 4 homes involved, 181, 171, 172, and 162, with all converging at 90 degrees to the road. And we've got a problem already with just 3, and if we put a 4th one there, and there's 2 issues that hasn't really been addressed that can't be mitigated. It's not only a climbing turn from the base of the hill up to the new construction, which will be on the right, but it's actually an S turn, and most people don't realize that. So by the time your eyes swing back to the right, to make sure you're not going to go off the road on the downhill side, you got to straighten it back out again for that straight stretch up toward my place. We've had 3 head-on collisions in front of my area up there in that period of time, and all of them were not visitors. They were people that live on Coronado. And so my personal speed limit up there is 15 miles an hour, with the exception of this particular curve, where I slow down even less. In fact, I hate coming down to see Mike because it's dangerous. I prefer to walk down and see him. I don't even like to get his mail and stand in front of his mailbox because people come around. The second issue is the road there is 18 feet wide, which has been explained. It's 16 feet wide up at my house at 122. And I can stand at the curb with my toes and touch the dirt across the street, almost totally all the way from my place all the way down toward the new construction site, almost the entire area. So we're talking a very steep area. There's no place to go. So my personal speed limit is 15, and we got those 4 driveways. Well, the issue is Recology took over here a while back from, who was the previous company?
Yeah.
So they went to picking up they changed trucks, bought new trucks. So now each of us have 3 trash cans. We have a garbage, a recycle, and a compost. So we have 4 homes down there now with 4 driveways. And as it stands, the 3 driveways that are there put all our garbage under the trees because that's sheltered and cars can't drive there. But that takes up 4 feet of the street. So we have 18 feet now cut to 14. Some of the homes, Mike's side, parks his garbage cans out in the street, which are from the other side. So now we have a 10-foot wide opening for all those garbage trucks, UPS, FedEx, and the post office, just to limit it. Now, it's not only that, those garbage trucks have to reposition They drive a compost truck up one side of Coronado, turn around and come back the other side of Coronado. So that's 2 trips. They do that with the garbage. They do that with the recycling. And they also have repositioning trucks. They have to reposition for Elston Court and Coleman Court. So I sat there one day on a garbage day, which is Friday, and we have 43 just garbage trucks. 43 garbage trucks driving by the front of our house and these other homes. And that's everything that's on my notes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So that's all of the speaker slips that I have. Was there anyone who wanted to speak on this item who hasn't had an opportunity to do so yet? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, so discussion among commissioners or questions
Sure.
for staff or...
I mean, I won't talk too long because clearly I talked a lot at the last meeting about this, and I certainly want to give Shannon and Scott a chance if you have any additional things you want to say. One of the things that pops out, though, I think the lighting study does show that just building something there is going to impact it. I think it makes a pretty good case that the additional 3-foot slope probably isn't going to make too much of a difference. But the driveway, I'm still really concerned about. And Lisa, would you mind putting the five driveway picture up? There, thank you. I guess one quick question to staff. Did our city engineer go and visit in person, or did she make her recommendations based on the plans?
I'll let Grace speak to that.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Grace Lee, city engineer. I did look at the site, the plan, and Google Earth and when the applicant says that Public Works has no safety concern, it's more accurately stated as Public Works has no additional or any particular to that proposed driveway, which means that that driveway faces the same scenario as other driveways on a narrow, winding street. So the person backing out needs to take caution, just like any other vehicles backing out of their existing driveways right now. That curve is really close to an existing driveway already. Hopefully, if it's residents or people who know the area going up, they would know that there's an existing driveway already, so maybe alert them to slow down for the next door driveway. So in and of itself, a driveway next to another driveway is not a particular safety concern. And in this situation, the proposed location it's facing the same scenario, has the same amount of needs to take the same amount of caution as any other driveway along that narrow, curvy street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the fact that the driver would be backing up almost into a blind curve, does that concern you in particular?
Now, when I say that it's the same scenario for all the driveways, if you can face forward and not have to back up into a curvy, fast-moving traffic, that would be best. Okay. If that's doable. I mean, the gentleman next door said he has space on his site, so if he wanted to do that, in any case, if you don't need to back up into traffic, that's already a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Those are all my questions for Grace at this point.
While she's here,
up
could I ask a question or two? The light pole.
The light pole.
Is that something that could be moved?
That's something that the applicant can apply for a permit for, and we'll have to look at the illumination. Well, the applicant will have to give a study on illumination, where they want to move it. Is that going to change in terms of coverage for that light, and just the conduits? So all the details would have to be proposed and submitted to Public Works.
And the second question I had is, this street seems to be a location where there are accidents, and it's a really windy road, and can anything be done, not necessarily as part of this project, but looking at the road, additional signs, lowering the speed limit, things like that, just something to think about?
And certainly, speed limits are based on speed studies, speed surveys. I'm sorry. So that would help dictate. The curviness of the road is a lot harder, unless you do a complete road reconstruction.
There could be signs that said, "You watch for,"
Signs.
I was up there. There's really no room for a sign to give notice. I mean, it is so crowded up there. It is so dangerous up there. I mean, I was really surprised. I was actually sort of frightened to be driving up there today, and it's that bad. I'm surprised that people had homes on the side of the hills with the road that skinny and dangerous. So I don't know if there's anywhere they could. I don't know. I guess you could speak on there. If there would be. By the time you see that sign, you're already at the corner.
Yeah, I think the key is going at a slow speed and knowing that there are driveways, multiple driveways, and people might be backing out. But if most of the drivers are residents, then they'll know what kind of scenario situation is here, and hopefully they would go really slow.
Grace, since you're here, and since you did also comment on the grading and dirt haul certificate, can I ask you a quick question? I noticed that you recommended a condition requiring pre and post-construction survey of the roadway to better define damages that are attributed to this project specifically. And this is a concern that other neighbors have brought up since a lot of construction has happened on Coronado. There seems to be a condition that we fix the road, but then nobody can quite ascertain who made the damage to the road. One of our neighbors had commented that prior projects had not been accountable for damage caused on Coronado. Can you comment on that? Have other construction sites indeed been held accountable, or is this statement accurate?
So my knowledge is 151 is near completion, but is not finalized yet. And what we do is Public Works has an inspector, building has an inspector, and we would go through and do punch lists, walk through, and punch list is for final, before you close out, what needs to be repaired, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be corrected. So that needs to occur. And the difficulty without a survey, pre-survey, is you don't have that evidence of this is definitively done by, this applicant, this construction, that construction. So the pre and post survey would help us identify that.
So it sounds like a condition that definitely needs to be added. It also sounds like 151 could indeed be held accountable. That process just hasn't been finalized yet.
Right, but they didn't do. There wasn't a pre.
So it's harder. It's harder to make the case.
It's harder. But our inspector throughout the construction project has been on site inspecting. So, yeah.
Thank you. So,
anything else for the engineer?
One more, and I don't know if it's for you or for the Director of Public Works. As far as the truck haul route, it comes in and off Holly Street and goes down to Britain. Is there an opportunity to use Britain going north or south if the trucks are going that direction rather than going down Industrial and using the Holly Street interchange? So I don't know where the trucks are coming from or going to, but can we adjust that so that using the Britain interchange is an option also if that's a shorter route for them?
That would make sense, but recently we've added truck routes, designated truck routes to an ordinance, and existing truck routes are the 101 freeway and El Camino. So there really wasn't anything defined in between. We've added, or we're proposing to add, the ordinance hasn't been through yet, but it's introduced. We're proposing to add Britton, Howard for the connection between El Camino and Industrial.
Yes.
So-
What I'm talking about is once you get to industrial, can they use Britain exit or entrance and Holly as being a secondary if Britain can't be used in either direction?
I think that makes sense, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else for the engineer? Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions for staff?
I don't think I have any more questions for staff at this point.
The applicant, the architect, could just come up for 30 seconds. If your project was approved today, when would you want to start construction?
That's a two-sided question. We have a grading moratorium that's soon approaching on October 1st, and we are already preparing to try and start excavation in order to at least get some digging and foundations done before the grading moratorium. And then we would call it quits for the winter and continue after the grading is done. If we are not able to complete the building permitting process and break ground in a reasonable time before the grading moratorium starts, we may have to postpone until the spring.
Okay. Discussion among the commission?
Yeah, I mean, after being up there, first off, looking at that beautiful architecture of the project and seeing just I can tell a lot of time and effort was put into the aesthetics of it and how it fits in. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. But I'm really concerned about that driveway, and I know what Public Works said, but I'm really concerned about that driveway, and I think that it enough to where I would be in favor of flipping it, even though the impact to the aesthetics of the house, because just I know that everyone's supposed to be watching out, but I mean we all have moments where we're not watching out, and it just seems like it's an accident waiting to happen, and so that's my 2 cents.
We can't approve, I mean, if we were to say we want the driveway flipped, we couldn't approve the project, right? Because we wouldn't have a project to approve. Is that correct?
You could approve it with that as a condition, that the design needs to be submitted back to planning with the driveway located on the left-hand side versus the right-hand side. If the commission would like to see that prior to it getting a building permit, we could always bring it back. Otherwise, it will impact, I mean, like the architect I think was trying to describe earlier, relocating the driveway to the right could potentially impact other regulations within the zoning ordinance, such as the height of the retaining wall. In the mock diagram that he prepared, there was a very large retaining wall, similar to what you see at 151. And keeping in mind that 151 was developed under the previous zoning ordinance, where there weren't as rigorous regulations for the hillside overlay areas as there are now. So planning would be concerned about how are we going to address that. So that's one issue. So it's kind of like you pull on one item and affects something else. But if that is the design that the Planning Commission would approve, then that's what the Commission would approve. But it could potentially impact other areas of the design.
Okay.
Through the chair, just one other point is just bringing you back to what is up for approval tonight. So I see that the relocation of the driveway is tied to potentially the design of the property and the grading and dirt haul. So if you're going to make a decision like that, keeping in mind what staff's saying about some unintended consequences that might result from that, what I see is you'd want to basically state on the record why you want to make the change based upon those two permit requests, and secondly, give staff some direction and discretion to deal with some of the potential consequences. And I'm just thinking one by example is the relocation of the light pole. We don't have a permit for that, so we'd if that was not feasible, then we could have a potential problem with that. So those are some of my thoughts.
Okay. Other Planning Commission comments? I mean, I've observed that I had concerns about the driveway. They're not alleviated, but I would be prepared to approve the project with some, minor tweaks as proposed, but just one vote. Any other Commission comments?
I mean, the driveway still concerns me. To be honest, that's the part that is definitely least alleviated since our last meeting. I have a concern about turning around and facing forward too, only because in my own experience, also living on a hill, having a next door neighbor who has a turnabout, that they don't use it because nobody uses it, because it just doesn't get used. The mechanical one, though, might be cool, but
yeah, I don't think they're going to make a 20-point turn.
We don't,
so,
right. We don't know enough down where I am at the bottom of the hill to afford that kind of stuff. But so my question would be, would they really use it, or would they back out? And I think while it's obvious that I think the city architect's point. Our city engineer's point is well taken, that there are clearly other safety concerns on this street, and that other houses face similar situations. I don't know that we want to add a fourth to what is really just a not good road. So that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd much rather see you steepen the thing a little, like another degree or something, and move it on the other side, or do some other sort of flexibility to make it work coming in from the other angle.
What kind of flexibility would staff need in order to be able to determine, to be able to flip it? I mean, what kind of things would we need to empower you to do? I want to make sure that if we make that decision that we can.
If we make that decision, I would rather see us send the project back to staff to come back to us, rather than to just attempt to approve a project and say, yeah, we're okay with this project, but you got to flip the driveway.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that will work.
Yeah.
I think we've either got to send it back to staff, or we've got to accept that this is the driveway that it's going to be, and it's one of those choices. I don't think I would, or at least I would certainly not be in favor of saying, yeah, it's okay, but flip the driveway.
Yeah, we'll forget about everything else and just
forget
deal with it.
everything else and flip it. We've either got to send it back to staff, or we have to make the decision that the driveway is okay.
Well, the driveway was my concern in the first meeting. We did send it back, and I think that I'm back at the same spot with the driveway being the biggest issue. I think the shadow study showed that there wasn't a huge impact. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the height. I'm fine with any other of the exceptions that they're requesting. The driveway seems to be just a logical, well, I know that it doesn't, I think from a logic standpoint, I think I said this last time too, logically 151 is faced the opposite way. So if you've got multiple driveways coming out the same direction, at least people know that they're all coming out that same direction. It's a bad corner, bad blind corner. It's a bad, I shouldn't say the word bad, but it's just a street that's had a lot of development, and there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done from a public works standpoint. And I think that from a safety standpoint, I'm still where I was at last meeting, which is the driveway should be flipped if that's an option that the applicant wants to take.
Okay. I mean, it seems like it's 4 votes to move the driveway. What I struggle with is when I look at this diagram, the driveway at 171 and coming out the direction that it is safer than the driveway at 181. I'm not saying it's safe. I'm just saying, hey, at least they're coming out in the right direction. And it's okay. It was okay at 181, although I guess it was proved 30 years ago or whenever it was approved, but it's not okay now. I mean, that's what I struggle with, but that's fine. So what is the motion going to be, Mr. Rubens? Is it going to be do we have to make a motion at all?
You know, if the commission, through its informal poll, has determined that they'd like to see more information about the location of the driveway from the other direction, and just for the record, the reverse of the current configuration, so that the street entrance of the driveway is closer to 142 Coronado. I think you can ask for the information and then continue the public hearing and ask for specific answers to those questions that have been raised tonight, so that you can make the findings that you need to make for design review and the grading and dirt haul permit. Safety is a big issue I hear from the commission tonight, so I think those issues might need to be developed a little bit further before you can make a decision on that. But if you feel the safer approach, after hearing from the city engineer, is that the driveway should be in a different location, and from a design and grading perspective you feel that, then I think the answer is come back, continue the item again, and come back to get that information. I have, over the years, seen commissions feel comfortable with making a delegation to staff. Hey, you have our authority to approve a driveway in a different location, but that might not be one of those cases here, because there's a lot of other consequences that I think the commission you've talked about would like to address. I can touch on the one thing that Commissioner Harper Pedersen was talking about, is the slope of the driveway. I do not think that's an option. That is a requirement of the fire department. They are just not going to be able to approve something that has a greater slope than the 18% because of the public safety access required to the site. And it's not just fire trucks, it's emergency response vehicles, it's city vehicles if there is something that goes wrong, it's PG&E vehicles, it's every type of emergency response that might be required that slopes a standard.
So it sounds like it's time for someone to either make a motion to continue this matter to a date uncertain with direction to staff to explore with the applicant flipping the driveway, or a motion to approve the project, delegating to staff to make changes to the design, to allow changes to the design to reflect a changed driveway. And it sounds like the former is likely to be the view of the commission. So in any event, I'll entertain some motion of some kind.
I'll make a motion to continue to the item to a date uncertain, for it to come back to us after staff has explored the possibility of flipping the driveway due to our safety concerns, and that's the reason we would like it looked at again.
Just through the chair, I prefer that staff provide you with a date, because we're in a public hearing, and that would prevent us having to renotice it.
Sure. Okay. Sure.
I mean, in order for staff to explore the possibilities for moving the driveway to the left-hand side, that will take some collaboration with the applicant. So while staff can certainly point towards a specific date, I would like to hear from the applicant maybe perhaps how much time you think we may need. Maybe it's we come back July 20th, or I mean, that would be my suggestion, because that gives us a little bit more time to do that collaboration, than coming back right away on the 6th. So if I could hear from the applicant if that's a date that would be feasible.
As much as I'd love to do the 6th, I think we'll have to do the 22nd.
The 20th?
I'm sorry, the 20th?
The 20th.
of July.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so do you want to, there's been no second, do you want to amend your motion to
And I
have it be
motion
the
that
July
we
22nd?
continue this item to the 22nd of July. 20th, excuse me, to the 20th July, to give staff time to work with the applicant to see about the possibility of moving the driveway to the other side, the closer to the 142, what is that, east or west?
Through the chair.
Aside from where it's at.
Through the chair, I forgot to mention this before. As part of that motion, I just request that you add that you're reopening the public hearing, so the next meeting you can just start with public hearing still open.
Okay. All right, so basically, so the staff can see about moving the driveway to the other side because of our safety concerns, and at the next meeting, we will be reopening the public hearing.
A friendly amendment to that would be, can we also get a complete shade study so that we can address any issues that might be lingering about additional houses being in shade?
You want to accept that amendment?
I'll accept that amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, that concludes that.
Oh, 177. All right, that's going to stay. That's going to, where did my trusty rubber band go? Landmark Hotel time.
All right, so the next item is the Landmark Hotel Development, 7B. The same procedures for public hearing apply, and the public hearing is open. I would observe a couple of things. First is I have two speaker slips. I have one. Oh, I have more. I have now 4 speaker slips. And I think that unless the commission objects, I think rather than starting with staff presentation, I'm going to start with public comment. I'd also observe for the record that prior to the meeting, I met with Dimitri Vandalos, and I also met with Paul Mangianetti. I'd also observe that I believe that that there are staff members from County Environmental Health here today, and I've observed in the past that at one time I represented County Environmental Health. I don't anymore, but I do know both of the staff, the Director of Environmental Health and Greg Smith, who are both here. With that.
I did also speak with Dimitri Vandalos, so I want to disclose that.
Okay.
And I've attended several neighborhood meetings, one on September 30th, one on May 13th, concerning the hotel.
Okay.
I as well. I don't remember the dates, though.
December 2nd.
Was that what it was?
I have also spoken with Dimitri Vandalos.
Okay. One moment.
Take some.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to begin with the public speakers. I'm going to begin with Mr. Vandalos. Okay, I'm going to begin with Mr. Mangianetti. Mangianetti, I'm sorry. Mangianetti. Third time's the charm.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today not so much to oppose or approve of the hotel, but in the way that the planned remediation of the land is being proposed. I made several comments to the draft DIR. One of the answers to my questions is how is this experimental PCB bioremediation going to work? And the answer is early monitoring shows remediation efforts are working to address contamination. I have some data here from Q1 and Q2 of 2015 that shows virtually no change in that. So that's a concern. Another one is how are they going to remove the hazardous material? And it says that there are no plans to remove and or transport any hazardous materials from that site. On the other hand, they also say they're going to be on the lookout for it. So if they find it, what's going to happen with that? The other is the Shell oil station. And report the responses, no substance releases were reported. Actually, that's a technical inaccuracy. The reason the data is not on the website is that the water boards has this huge backlog of paper records of what was there and what was cleaned up. And it's just a space holder saying that it was closed. It's closed until they finally find and have the time and the resources to put that up on the document for the public to see. So that's it on the comments to my responses. The main reason that I'm here and concerned is the materials of contamination. They include petroleum products, TCE, PCE, and other chlorinated hydrocarbons. Well, it's the other chlorinated hydrocarbons that I'm most concerned with. This is something published in 2001 on PCBs in urban watersheds. And you'll see this area of large circles, the larger the circle indicating the concentration, that's San Carlos right there. And the reason that we have such high concentrations of PCBs is after World War II, and because of its proximity to Moffett Field, this was the place where they began developing microwave technology. Now, this is way back then in the 50s and 60s. These things were huge. They needed huge transformers, and they needed huge cooling towers. Well, the miracle material of the age was polychlorinated biphenyl because it didn't break down like some of the others and didn't catch fire like the others. And it was used all throughout industrial San Carlos. And the way that they would store it, well, they used it to degrease the machine metals they had. And they would dispose of it in what they called a sludge pit. So the volatile organic carbons would evaporate away. What didn't evaporate was left behind. And it's still there. In fact, at the Tenklid site, there is an actual sludge pit that they found underneath the building. So it's actually a fossil record of our environmental past here. And this is an example of how these sludge pits move through the environment. And also here is a technical fact sheet on the effects of PCBs on the environment, how it gets bioconcentrated as it goes up the food chain, and eventually into us, because we're at the top of the food chain. We have the unfortunate
So, Paul, about how much time do you think you're going to need?
About 2 more minutes.
Okay.
We have the unfortunate reality of having the number 1 and the number 4 top 10 PCB sites in terms of concentration. One is the Delta Star, where they manufactured the transformers for all of these equipments, also for PG&E. Interestingly enough, no one's gone onto PG&E property and tested for PCBs there. The other one is our Pocos Pump Creek station that is pumping the PCBs into the San Carlos Creek, which is pretty much dead from the pump station down. So you just have to ask yourself the question, how did those PCBs get from Delta Star all the way down to the Pocos Creek pump station? Now, there are prevailing southerly winds every afternoon. The winds all blow south, and that is a big source. Right now this year, the levels are actually a little bit lower because we haven't had much rain, because what happens is the PCBs like to adhere to very, very, very small particles. And when it rains, all of those go into the storm drain and they get pumped out of the sludge pit. And I also have here an article on 50 years of microwave communications development in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a really big thing during the Cold War. We had this huge advantage of being able to communicate in ways that other countries could not. Unfortunately, it has left this legacy, and again, my concern are these other chlorinated hydrocarbons. In the response to my questions,
Can I ask you a question? On what you're holding up, is that for the landmark site itself, or is that for the general area?
That's for the general area.
Okay.
I also have ones for the landmark site itself.
But basically, in a nutshell, Paul, what you're asking is that testing be done for PCBs and that PCBs, to the extent they're found, be cleaned up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ben Fuller?
Okay, first of all, I want to ask a little bit about the process question here. Who makes the agenda for these meetings, Al? Who decides? Because this is again and again and again, Al, that we have these meetings and we were put after a single family home. We put out a communication to our neighborhood. All kinds of people showed up and have now left. This is a recurring incident where the agendas are being manipulated in the city of San Carlos to seemingly stifle public comment. And it's just unacceptable. And meanwhile, I'm seeing time checks on an issue as important as PCBs by you, David, and you don't have a very sterling record in terms of environmental protection. So maybe you should recuse yourself from the hotel. I mean, my whole point is that I think we really, if we're going to, this is a major project with hundreds of rooms, and it's going to generate $1 million a year. The last project in this area, $15 million. Got extracted out of our neighborhood. We got not one dime from the Palo Alto Medical Foundation. And here we are all the way down the road on a hotel. Nothing's been promised to our neighborhood. So I want to talk to you about what I think we need. And I really think we need to be careful. If we're going to agendize these kind of important projects, don't put it after a single family home where a couple people are worried about their views. This is a major deal. There's no hotel in the whole city of San Carlos like this. It's the Landmark Hotel. So now I want to get into the issues.
Ben, in all fairness, that was continued from the last meeting. So the staff had no idea that we were going to continue it from the last meeting. We can't move them just to hear you first. That's the reality of it.
It just happens again and again and again, and it's a little bit more than a conspiracy at a certain point. It just keeps happening. Where like the same thing happened with the transit village. We were waiting for piss ant style stuff compared to this. So, and pardon my French. I'm going to talk about the three issues, and I appreciate your response. Issue number one is toxics. So the way this would have to work to be correct is there's 30 feet of garbage land. We want it all shipped out and fresh dirt put in. Anytime you're going to do a major project like this, like PAMF, they actually got rid of all the crap. This is our opportunity to clean this up. Now, if you decide to just reward the business owners like Tankledge and guys like that who corrupted our land and are going to give us all, potential diseases like cancer, then San Carlins become liable for all the junk that goes into the bay. All the PCBs that go into the bay, San Carlos can be fined for. So we want all that removed as part of this hotel deal. The second thing is, I don't know who this was, approved East San Carlos. There was supposed to be a lot of development on East San Carlos. It was going to become a walking street. It's not a walking street. It's the least safe pedestrian street you could possibly imagine. So there's going to be a lot of traffic generated from the hotel. We want East San Carlos to become a legitimate pedestrian throughway for the hotel customers. Right now, 4 or 5 businesses are being afforded horizontal parking spaces for their personal convenience. And we think this is more of a community benefit. So can you please fix East San Carlos? We just spent a whole bunch of money on that road and we didn't do it right. We built a pedestrian throughway for half of it, but if you'll see, it turns into like a quarter lane road. We got shuttles running down. There's not enough space for bikes, and there's definitely not enough space for pedestrians. Fix East San Carlos. The third thing is, when Al and I started talking about this hotel, there was supposed to be lots in it for the neighborhood. That's been dribbled down to nothing. There's no promises or anything. So it looks like another cash grab where you guys just go and get huge bags of loot and you run back to the other side of town. So we're asking for a few things. More trees, which we still haven't gotten from the Transit Village. Cleaning up the train station, which still hasn't happened, and most importantly, we're asking for parklands. I know there's a big push to put Black Mountain in. We got nothing against that, but it's time. There's more and more people using less and less land. So let's build up our parks in Greater East San Carlos. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hertzberg?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I just want to reiterate a couple of the points which Ben just made and Paul just made, which are, the city at one point in time approved developments that, were of economic value to the community. And there must have been some sweetheart deals to allow the level of contamination that exists around our neighborhood that provided the economic boom at the time in San Carlos, but left a huge toxic legacy, which future generations, in fact our generation, are required to clean up. This is really a public-private partnership. The city owns the land and is selling it to the developer. I really think the city needs to play the role of ensuring that this site is as cleaned up to the maximum possibility possible. It's leaching into the groundwater, into the San Francisco Bay. The city's been sued over sewer overflows into the San Francisco Bay and as a result, the community had to reinvest in its sewer system. Okay, well that happened, but this is a specific site. We've got a number of these sites all around our neighborhood. We really want to see them cleaned up, and this is the opportunity. And the city really has an obligation to make this a model cleanup project, just the way PAMF was. Again, about East San Carlos, that's really supposed to be a 2-lane road with a bike lane, with pedestrian access. And where those businesses have been allowed to encroach into the public right-of-way, it really is a pinch point. I commute down that road coming back forth from work, and it just I see the risk. And as this landmark hotel comes, this is going to become a major thoroughfare for visitors who want to walk into the downtown area. We really need to make sure this is a safe area for all these different types of traffic issues. And then this is a family residence hotel of which families are expected to stay here for an extended period of time, including children. Closest place they're going to want to go is Loriola Park. There's a direct nexus between this hotel and improvements at Loriola Park. Would really like to see some park mitigation improvements. I know the city's going to get $1 million, but where is it going into the community? There really needs to be some connection to improvements at Loriola Park as a result of increased use as a result of this development. Thank you very much.
Mr. Coran Gregg?
So just a quick thing. I represent, we have the family has a small commercial property on industrial, another couple of hundred yards down, a couple of 100 feet down, so towards Britain. The web information says that any toxics that are taken out of this site will be taken on industrial to Holly to 101 and away. The letter that we got at home says on industrial to 101. So we'd really like to have the toxics. I'd like to know which way it is first.
Industrial to Holly versus industrial to Britain? I mean, to Whipple? Is that what you're trying to ascertain?
What it says on the web-based information is it goes from the site there to Holly to 101. So in other words, just immediately
around the
exits,
corner.
basically.
Yeah.
But the letter that we got as owners nearby is that it just goes on industrial to 101. And so that letter leaves the possibility that it would go past our property.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll ask clarification. Yeah, we'll get clarification, right?
And then, related then, so the toxics, assuming that the toxics are taken care of, then this is a pretty major project. And we have clients, it's a physical therapy person leases it. And so they have clients coming and going all day and everything. And we're wondering about the level of traffic just for all the other construction materials that are, and so forth as well.
Okay.
And then finally, I have no idea, and I didn't see anything on the web information yet about the level of, about the parking kind of implications. You know, I mean, I understand that there's some thought of a 2-hour permit process or something like that. But for example, we want to make sure that people aren't deciding to park overnight in our lot and things like that.
Sure.
So,
Sure, and Mr. Savay or someone from the city can speak to that. I know there's an answer to that specifically.
Okay,
and does the grading and staff, does the grading and dirt haul certificate also apply to the removal of the toxics? So does the grading and dirt haul certificate have the dirt haul route is from Industrial Road to Holly Street to US 101. That's item 23 of the dirt haul certificate.
Okay.
So that takes care of that.
Perfect, yeah. That's what's
the
on the
parking
site.
will
It's
answer, and the answer is going to be that there's going to be a permit program that's supposed to go to the city council very shortly. And then the third question was with respect to whether there's going to be traffic during construction.
Traffic with all
Yes,
the
there's going to be
construction.
traffic during construction.
Right. So, yeah. So is there any...
Is there like a mitigation that we could put
some
in place?
mitigation for that, yeah.
What are you specifically concerned about? Are you?
I don't have a good feel for, you know, how many trucks are going to come and go for a project like this, but we just want to make sure that, you know, the person that's coming for their appointment doesn't spend 20 minutes on a block of industrial, I guess.
I think that generally speaking, we can and do minimize the number of trucks that can go to and from each day. Is that covered by the dirt haul certificate as well?
There's a time, I think, but other than that.
Yeah, there's traffic control measures. Well, we're not going to be done tonight, so that's something I'd ask staff to take a look at that issue if they could before this comes back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Joseph?
I want to reiterate, all the speakers ahead of me. You just, he spoke about Britain Avenue. I live on Holly. There are 34 residential homes, and there is misinformation. The letter, the response that I got to my question says, the waste or PCB removal does not happen, and the dirt removal does not go on Holly, but now you are confirming that it does indeed go on Holly, so it doesn't make sense, especially when the city is considering saying no trucks on Holly. So there seems to be no coordination, or you just don't care.
Well, no, I'm saying I was just reading what the dirt haul certificate says.
Well, but the response from you guys to me says that it's not going to affect Holly, which is not true.
When they talk about Holly, they talk about Holly east of industrial. So they're not talking about the residential portion of Holly.
I want
They're
it to be
talking
clarified
about,
because
yes,
the response to
yes.
me says there's no impact.
Yes.
It doesn't, there's no impact is what it says. So I just want it to be clear.
The response will be that we'll adjust the dirt haul permit so that it says Holly Street east of industrial.
Awesome. And I want to also bring up this. City actually produced a traffic study related to this, which actually says the hotel has no impact on the traffic. I find it hard to believe. I want it recorded that it is just impossible to have no impact on traffic. I mean, it's just dishonesty, plain dishonesty. You pay a consultant and you get the result that you want. So you just can't do that. And then there was another one, there's an ordinance 1230, which I exchanged emails with Greg on, which is on it was issued in 1997. It should at least be adjusted for inflation. And the response I got is that, the hotel is not a public building. It has no impact. Look at the number of residents here. Clearly it affects all of us. So how can you not, ask them to pay, there's a carbon footprint tax, which is a perpetual tax that you should impose. I asked about that and you say, there's no public impact. I mean, you're setting a dangerous precedent here. You take it seriously.
Thank you. Mr. Vandelos?
Hi, Planning Commission members. I want to thank those of you who had taken the time to chat with me. It's something I appreciate, so we can go into issues without it being in a kind of charged environment, in a time-constrained environment. So, thank you all who reached out and had a conversation. It's hard to know what really to discuss because there are so many kind of things that you could potentially be approving, right? There's the EIR, there's a bunch of, dirt hauling, there's other stuff. I can't, to go through it all, it would take quite a bit of time. And I'm struck with something. I'm struck with, with no disrespect to the previous project, that in this packet, over half of the materials were for a single-family home. And here we have something that's 205 residences, another project that affects the Loreola neighborhood, and less than 50% of the information, and we're dealing with an EIR in there, we're dealing with significant impacts, is devoted to that. So it strikes me as I don't even know what to comment on, because should I be commenting on the EIR, should I be commenting on specific issues related to the design, etc. I feel I'm sort of put in a tough place here. So I don't want to belabor a number of points, but I do think that we have a unfortunate toxic legacy that we've inherited, and I would ask that we test for PCBs and other contaminants that have been found on other sites on industrial. I think that would be a prudent thing to do. And then if we find them, let's not do experimental remediation. Let's actually just take care of the problem. I think that would go a long way to building a climate of trust. I'd also just like to comment on some of the designs. I went over some of that with you folks. I'd like for this group to sort of really play around with the ratios of units and parking and placement of the actual entrance of the hotel to see if we can come up with a design that minimizes impacts along industrial, which is right by the homes. So, there's an equation there. Is there some way we could sort of figure out something that makes sense? And in that, I realize that the city may need to give up something. It might need to give up a few rooms in order to make something more accommodating for the neighborhood. But I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to build other hotels along industrial, hopefully not right across the street from a neighborhood. Again, water recapture systems. Should that be a discussion on the EIR? Should that be a discussion about the design? I don't know. But I think it's high time that we came up with more sane and rational approaches to development and to reduce the impact. We're in a significant water shortage. we all have to figure out how to manage through this. And I think the old ways of looking at things really don't work. We have to really adjust to a new paradigm. And lastly, I have spoken with some of you about this, and it's not something that we can address right now, but I don't see why we can't really, and I'll talk to city council members. When we have big projects like this, I think it's really incumbent on staff to provide the materials so there's plenty of time for planning commission members and the community to really absorb the information that's there. Because it's easy, we can get into inflated rhetoric about issues which may have some truth or not truth. But unless people have the time to examine it and we figure out a different kind of discourse and a way to actually communicate, I'm afraid that we're just going to continue to increase friction, and that's something that, quite frankly, I'm kind of tired of. I mean, I think everyone here on this board, you're all residents of San Carlos, and I appreciate what you're doing. You're taking your own personal time. I didn't volunteer to be a member of any of these commissions, but I spend inordinate amounts of time because our neighborhood is so impacted. And let's figure out a way to do this better. And I think one easy way to do this is short circuit or change this process so we have some time to have some discussions ahead of time. So when you're actually deliberating, you're deliberating with enough feedback from the community and from staff and from consultants and all that other kind of stuff. And my last statement is I do think the city needs to look at some other traffic company that looks at traffic. I've seen too many reports from Hexagon that just kind of fly in the face of reality. It kind of makes me think about, like, unicorns and things like that. When we add 205 residences, whether they're permanent or not, and it has no impact, actually lowers the traffic impact, that kind of doesn't quite add up for me. And I know that we'll lose some of the gyms, but they may even just move over across the street, so there's no guarantee, right? So with that said, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Fusaro?
Hi, Commissioners, staff. My name is Rita Fusaro. I guess I need to maybe mention that I am on the city's Transportation Circulation Committee, but I'm here representing myself as a homeowner. And first of all, I'd like to say I'm really excited. There's a lot of really great changes going on in San Carlos. And the development that's going on is exciting, and I think it actually can be really great if it's done right. And I'm looking at this picture, and this touches on the first thing that I've thought about when I thought about this hotel. You can see these two people that are walking. They're actually that crosswalk. They're actually heading down East San Carlos Avenue. That's where they're going. In fact, you can see the other side of the street. There's not even an option to kind of cross there. And so I think that really kind of just makes me think of, compare this a little bit to the that new condominium or apartment complex that's going in where Foodville is, which is also very beautiful.
Wheeler Plaza.
Yes, and the way they've integrated that into the neighboring and tangent areas is they've brought restaurants on the ground floor, beautiful because it's on Laurel Street, so that integrates Laurel Street with that complex. And then they've also made this passageway from Laurel through to Elm Street, and where the library is and other aspects of our community, which is also really great. So you look at that and you think, wow, it's really kind of just intertwined to the whole community. And it's very cool. And so when I look at this, I think, well, why not? Why not, why not make why can't we just, that's just such a small little win for just, not the neighborhood because I'm from there, but just, it just looks like it fits in better. So it's connected. And it just is a nice thing. If I were those people, that's probably what I'd want to do. Shortest line between, shortest distance between A and B is a straight line type of thing. So anyways, I'm just kind of reiterating that. I think it'd be really cool. And I don't think it takes much adjustments, just a little bit of improvement. So that's number one. And then the second thing, I just wanted to applaud Paul for all his research on that PCB issue. That's just amazing. And it's also a little scary. And I was reminded of a quote, which I don't know who said it, but it was not to look at things in terms of our environment and our community in a way that you are dealing with what you inherited, but rather borrowing, inherited from your ancestors, but rather borrowing from your children. So when you think of it like that, then you think, if anybody has children or grandchildren, you would do the world for them, right? And I don't think you'd want to build anything for them on something that's carcinogenic. I know I wouldn't. So anyways, the hope is everybody has all these different viewpoints. So I know you guys just have to put them all together in a bucket. So I just thought I'd add mine. And, but anyways, again, great work. It's really pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to some of the changes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sang? Michael?
Hello, I'm Michael Seng from 501 Industrial, right next door to a landmark development site. Admittedly, I've missed a few meetings before this one. I was under the impression that plans haven't changed too much, but this is different from what I saw probably 3 months ago. There's a few concerns. One is, since the city wants to redevelop, has rezoned that entire area, I just want to make sure that the plans here have provisions for an easement to my property and then the Bakers Union's property. Also, I saw that they were bringing the hotel up to grade or above grade, and I just have concerns for drainage, for flood drainage. I know we're in a drought, but then we've had some floods on our property before, so I don't want the hotel flood to come into my property and make it worse. Also, back to the easement, I want to make sure that I don't get landlocked in the time, when the time comes that we want to develop our piece. Because it looks like there's new crosswalks being put in, and traffic may change, so I want to make sure that my property is still developable, can be developed, and still has value, can be accessed, etc. And there's a small concern about off-site improvements. I want to make sure that if that stuff kind of happens, everybody shares the pot, doesn't get loaded on myself or another property.
Could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear you. Said what about off-site improvements?
That I don't get stuck with the bill if it somehow lands on my property. That it's prorated between all the parcels, etc. Because it benefits all. Yep.
Does staff want to respond briefly to the easement issue and the other issue that was raised?
Well, I was just looking at the map with the community development director, and there already is an access off a public street for your property, so I'm not sure what your concern is on access.
Are we talking about the left turn on industrial to my property, or are we talking about a new one that's been drawn out?
No, the existing access to your property, it's there on industrial on a public street. So I'm not sure what the easement, why you're requesting an easement, or how it's related to the approvals that are.
There were concerns that intersection would change over time, and I don't in the case that it does change over time, I don't want to be landlocked.
Okay. Well, I understand your question now. So this project won't affect your access, and any redesign of the Holly Industrial Interchange will have to preserve your access to industrial. I don't know all the particulars, but you will have to have access off of industrial. If you're concerned about whether or not a left-hand turn from industrial southbound on your property, I can't address that right now, but you will definitely, your access will have to be preserved.
Right. So that's sort of is part of my concern too. So if in the case, the intersection does change, it of course won't affect my current access, but future access, if that piece becomes developed, will it change then? Because of course there'll be a traffic impact on that immediate left if we preserve the current access. So what I'm saying is, could there be provisions for an East San Carlos access or similar? Because
a lot of this is hypothetical, so I know because we don't know what's going to be potentially proposed for your property in the future. But
I do want to keep that in your minds,
and that's in the record now. So.
And the other issue is the flooding issue.
I'm sure you guys will.
Well, most of that's probably for an engineering question, but I know usually there's some conditions of approval that will require the stormwaters to remain on this property, and I know there's usually a plan to that effect.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So those are all the speaker slips I have. Was there someone here who wanted to speak that I missed, who filled out a speaker slip, or who wants to speak?
I do see.
Okay, so then I believe we can move on to the presentation.
What's that? I don't know. We still got to do the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and members of the Planning Commission. What I'd like to do is start with a brief background. Then I will introduce some folks from R.D. Olson in the architect to go over the architectural design and the project. And then Lisa Costa-Sanders, our principal planner, will talk about the entitlements that are before you this evening. Any project of this scale and complexity requires a good deal of thought and expertise. And tonight, on the screen, you'll see a list of the people who are here this evening to answer questions of the Planning Commission and the public. I'm not going to go through this list, but I can assure you that there's somebody here that could probably answer just about any question that comes up. And so as we move through the Q&A period, we'll bring those folks up. In terms of the history, the landmark site has for many years been considered a prime location for regional serving, commercial, and hospitality uses, which would contribute to the city's financial viability and implement our economic development plan and our land use plans. In terms of the history, the city has considered these properties a landmark property for maybe a quarter century or more, and it's taken this long to bring a project to fruition. Most recently, the city acquired 3 properties. We partnered with a hotel developer, and so this is a public-private partnership. We conducted a number of community meetings. We had 3 neighborhood meetings with the Greater East San Carlos neighborhood. And at each of those meetings, we heard from the neighborhood, and each time the developer came back with changes to the architecture or the project in some way to accommodate some of the concerns that were expressed at those neighborhood meetings. An EIR was prepared and went out to public. Tonight, of course, we're before you. Final decision-making authority for the development agreement and the EIR will come from the City Council. But with you, you have final decision-making authority on a number of entitlements. So in terms of the site, this is the site, and you see the 3 parcels in red there. Those are the landmark parcels that we're talking about. But as you know, and as Mr. Singh noted, there's actually 5 properties in all at that industrial location at Hawley Street. And these properties were rezoned by the City Council to landmark zoning to signal to the marketplace that the city wanted the use, any use that happens there, to be consistent with the long-term land use goals of the city. But why a hotel development? Well, a hotel development on the landmark site has long been sought by the city, as I noted, as a means to, yes, to increase the recurring diversity of our general fund revenues, and it would also have significant benefits for employment in our community and contribute to our economic sustainability. A new hotel would also be an amenity for the local businesses and a place for our community to gather and to host out-of-town guests. In terms of the development program, it's an extended stay upscale hotel. It has 204 rooms. There are on-site amenities for guests, and there is a meeting room, and the grounds, we have been told, are available for public use. As one speaker mentioned, the corner of East San Carlos and Industrial is an important intersection for the hotel folks to get across the street safely, and for traffic, as you know, driving through there now with all the traffic. There is a lot of traffic there at this point, and a big improvement would be to put a signal there and to put a crosswalk across the street. And that's what you saw in that photo that we showed you at the very beginning, or that illustration. So that is something that is being that would be done by the city of San Carlos. So a new light would be put at that intersection, as well as a crosswalk across, and that would be done by the city. There's 136 new on-site trees in the Greater East San Carlos neighborhood meetings. At the meetings, there was a request for landscaping on the west side of Industrial to help to screen the hotel and also for aesthetic purposes. What I'd like to do now is introduce the R.D. Olson and their architect, and then we'll have Lisa Costa-Sanders come up.
Good evening, Commissioners. We appreciate this opportunity to present our proposed hotel to you this evening. I am Tony Rozek, Vice President with R.D. Olson Development, the applicant. We are excited to propose our landmark hotel, an upscale, select service, extended stay type of hotel. A hotel that has been proven to cater to an unmet demand within the city of San Carlos and the greater San Carlos area. This unmet demand is for a power traveler, the businessman that, sorry, one slide too many here. As you can see from the demographics, these demographics are generated from our existing hotels, and they typify our typical guest at an upscale extended stay type of hotel. Our proposed guest rooms, which include kitchens, are designed to cater to this power traveler. We will offer a mix of studios, 1-bedroom suites, and 2-bedroom suites, all with kitchens. The quality of the guest rooms are represented by the photos to the right. The 2 photos that you see are from our extended stay development in the city of Tustin. The upper photo to your right being an image of our living area looking towards our kitchen. And the photo below is obviously the spacious bathroom looking beyond into the sleeping quarters. Key features would be spacious suites, flexible live-work areas, and upscale bathrooms and kitchens. Our hotels recognize the different needs of long-stay guests, and our design focuses on enhanced style, comfort, and convenience. The quality of our public spaces are represented by the images to your right. The upper left-hand image is our Irvine Spectrum Hotel. Again, upscale, select service. We take pride in developing our hotels to be above and beyond the local market in its equivalent level of stay. This is, again, a select service hotel which has enjoyed many comments and compliments on its boutique and custom feel. Like our other hotels, whether it be in Orange County or Santa Barbara or in Hawaii, each hotel will be customized and reflect the local culture and neighborhood in which it is located. Now I'd like to focus on our history. R.E. Olson has over 15 years of successful development within California and Hawaii. Last year, we were nominated as Developer of the Year for Marriott International. And we have a sister company with over 30 years of successful construction experience. We have a strong relationship with major brands, but I will show you also that we have been developing independent boutique-style brands. And what you see over to our right is an image of our new Four Diamond Resort in Huntington Beach on PCH, 250 rooms, about approximately 20,000 square feet of meeting facilities, a signature restaurant. A different product appropriate for that market. Also in our current development pipeline is a boutique hotel, a Four Diamond Hotel in the city of Newport Beach. This hotel will have 130 keys, reminiscent of a Nantucket harbor type style. Again, I'd hope you can see from the images the quality of design, also the fact that these hotels do reflect the local culture. Select service hotels currently in development and under construction. A Residence Inn in Pasadena, one that was designed to reflect the historic nature of the city, and then a Spring Hill Suites in Burbank, one catering to the television industry. And with that, I'd like to pass this along to an architect, Jeremy Grant with DLR Group.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Jeremy Grant. I'm with DLR Group, the project manager on this project. Tony touched on about how his hotels react to the region and is styled accordingly. And I'd just like to touch on and bring about the collaborative design process that we've been going through for about a year now. As mentioned, we've met with the community groups, the Greater East San Carlos Neighborhood Association, 3 times, September, December, and May. We've worked closely with the city planners, Public Works, of course, Tony, his concerns, the owner's concerns, our own concerns at DLR Group to produce a good project for San Carlos. And I'd also like to note that we've worked with a consultant architect on behalf of the city requests to work with the architecture and stylings. Here we have is the first initial plan. It's really not much different than what we have now. If I wasn't to point out all the things I'll be discussing in the next 5-10 minutes. At the start of the project, we pushed the building up to 50 feet from the curb. Right now, it's a 10-foot setback, so we're pushing the building back 40 more feet. We were looking at a typical guest room floor, starting from the closest to Industrial Road, going all the way up. So a 4-story mass right at that industrial road frontage. Here we've moved back the building 4 more feet, and we've stepped back the building on the 3rd and 4th floors an additional 17 feet. So the face of the building is 54 feet from the industrial road. As it sits, the current building the existing building is approximately the same height, but it is very close. It is about 16 feet from the curb. Another plan here, the ground floor. Here we've placed a lot of the public space to be accessible along East San Carlos and Industrial to kind of activate that corner. And this is a new plan we've provided at the request of the community, 2 parklets that flank each side of the building at the street frontage. We've provided much landscaping, a layering effect along our frontage and as well on the west side of Industrial Road. So here we have the initial plan where we're having the guest rooms go all the way up from floors 2, 3, and 4. You can see the stepping back of the roof. So this is actually floors 3 and 4 stepping back 17 additional feet from the building face. This minimizes the visual impact from the residences. As you can see, this is our new landscape plan. We required 15% landscape area for the lot on the property. We're providing 21% landscape, so that's an additional 6%. We're also providing additional trees along the street frontage. 1 additional works with the landscape, so it's even a more dense screening of the building. You can see on the very lower portion of the screen is the landscape buffer that's and improvements that we're making right adjacent to the residences. This further enhances the screening of the building, noise, and even the traffic along Industrial Road. Right as it sits, the landscaping is, it's dying out there, so we're proposing new landscaping and a plan to future maintain that. You can see the blow up of that area. This is all off-site on the west side. You can also see the parklets. To the right, we have a little hardscape area with plenty of native plantings, drought-tolerant plantings, sort of the entrance to our project for the pedestrian and for the resident. And you can see the enhancements to the crosswalks that bridge Industrial Road into our project and our project into Greater San Carlos. What we've done is we've provided, let me go back here, we've provided a walkable environment for the residents, for the public. They can freely walk around our project, enjoy the landscape, enjoy the architecture. Here you can see a diagram of, on the top, our initial scheme, maximize that volume. But we heard the Greater East San Carlos. We reduced that impact on all the floors, and we pushed back 3 and 4, that 17 additional feet. You can see the difference in the landscape treatment of the street frontage as well. We've over doubled the landscape on the west side. We had proposed a screening wall to block the view of vehicles. We've replaced that with a tall hedge at the request of the the residents. And also we've increased the size of the trees as they will be planted. They will be more mature. You can see our initial scheme on architecture. We've come a long way. We now kind of refer to this as a refined contemporary craftsman style, more reflective of the region, the greater Bay Area and San Carlos. You can see that we've worked on the proportion, the scaling, the vocabulary of the architecture. I would say the initial design was, at best a little interesting, but we've added a lot of detail, like wood balconies, soaring roof planes, plenty of variation in color. We've heard planning's requests for a base, middle, and top design, and a varied parapet to break up the massing and scale of the project. Here you can see an overall view. You can see the changes. There's a language there's a primary, a secondary language there. We're also screening any sort of public guest amenity, such as the pool deck and sports courts with plantings. Here we go is the freeway side. Very proportional, very scaled. When we scaled down, the building too is much taller. Right now we're at the 50-foot height limit at the tallest tower. The roof is at 42 feet. We're allowed the 50 feet. You can see here's an initial massing. Pay close attention to the area fronting Industrial Road. You can see the high massing, and in this scheme you can see it's been stepped back, layering of landscape to soften that as well. Another view of that corner at East San Carlos and Industrial. It's a mix of 1 and 2 story along the frontage now instead of a 4-story mass. And I'd just like to talk about, we want to provide an amenity to the public of San Carlos. So that first step is that crosswalk and intersection, making it safe for the pedestrian and our guests to travel and use your, retail and park environments. You can here see the entry, softened with plenty of landscape, very mature trees, very large trees. Here's the screened pool and barbecue, outdoor patio, and recreation areas. And here's something I'd like to touch on again is the walking path around the project. Fully access, 360 degrees around the hotel, lush landscape, all native and drought tolerant. Here you can see the siding of the building, the tall new development in the background, the other industrial buildings, tall buildings in the background. I think that's kind of my stopping point. Maybe I can just touch on that we're using a lot of stone along the base, smooth plaster, slat wall system, and wood detail, inset windows, storefront glazing, and the landscape ties it all together. So we're using a large variation in materials and surfaces and planes, and that's just in working with the community to tailor this project to something that's acceptable. Thanks for your time.
Good evening. Walk you through the entitlements. The items before you, a few of them are City Council action and a few are Planning Commission action. So for the City Council, it would be a recommendation that the City Council certify the environmental impact report and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And the City Council also would have the authority to approve the disposition and development agreement. The disposition and development agreement outlines the terms on which the developer would purchase the property from the city, and then the details of that development, any off-site improvements would also be outlined in the disposition and development agreement. Planning Commission action, I'll walk through each of these for you tonight, is the design review, the conditional use permit, grading and dirt haul permit, transportation demand management plan, and a finding of general plan consistency for that disposition of the property to the applicant. And the first item, we have prepared an environmental impact report. The consultant that prepared that document is here this evening, as well as the traffic engineer. And as I indicated, it would be a recommendation to the City Council for certification. A scoping meeting was held in September, and the draft EIR was available for public review in very early February. We did receive comments on those documents, and all of those comments have been responded to in the final EIR. The EIR evaluated the potential impacts of the project, and with the implementation of the mitigation measures, all potential impacts are considered less than significant. The Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program implements those mitigation measures that are outlined in the EIR. The mitigation measures include best management practices during construction, dust control, stormwater measure, as well as the remediation of any hazardous materials in the soil as well as found in the building. Implement the recommendations of the geotechnical report. As you know, we're in an earthquake zone, so we would need to follow those recommendations through the course of construction, as well as prepare an acoustical study, and that really relates to the interior noise, given that's adjacent to the freeway. Also, requirement to raise the building pad out of the floodplain. Excuse me. The design review, that is an item before the Planning Commission to review and approve the design of the new building. As reviewed by the architect, does require high quality design with architectural details. We did have this design peer reviewed by another architect, and they were able to incorporate a lot of those comments that really enhance the design. The upper level building does step back, and there's many building facade breaks. Ground level of pedestrian scale with that main building entrance, and the use of high quality finished materials and a complementary color palette. The conditional use permit, this use is considered conditional as a hotel in the GCI zoning district. The use is consistent with the general plan and zoning designation, and the project does comply with the objective standards of the GCI zoning district. The grading and dirt haul, we have that before you for your consideration. The grading is estimated at 7,000 cubic yards, and again, that's to raise the building pad out of the floodplain. And the haul route would be from Holly Street just to industrial, so it would not go through the residential neighborhood, and then accessing the site. And the Transportation Demand Management Plan, also an item before the Planning Commission for consideration. The hotel will provide shuttle for its guests. There's also on-site measures that include bicycle storage, transit information, employee showers. And we've added conditions to the certificates as well to enhance that TDM plan a bit. And that is a condition for a bike loan program, so that the hotel would provide bikes to the hotel guests on a loaner basis. And then also to train the front counter staff on local transit information so they can better educate guests on how to use public transportation. And then there is a requirement in state planning and zoning law, California Government Code, that requires the disposition of any property by the city, that the Planning Commission make a finding of general plan consistency. And we've outlined in your staff report that those findings can be made as this project is consistent with the general plan designation. The next steps be upon recommendation of the Planning Commission. This item would move forward to City Council for consideration of the EIR and the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan. Then the City Council would also consider the Disposition and Development Agreement, demolition of the buildings, and start construction hopefully in fall of this year with project completion in spring. And we have the recommendation as well as the formal motion. And at this time, we'd be happy to try to answer any questions. And as Al indicated, we have a whole team here for you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know we have staff from, Mr. Savé indicated we had two different types of environmental staff.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, one quick note. You do have a couple of amended conditions in front of you. I prepared those relating to the grading and dirt haul as well as the co-compliance certificate, just some minor amendments there. One of them relates to a public works requirement that there be a break in the sound wall that's being proposed for a future bike path. As that bike path hasn't been designed yet, we're not sure exactly where that break might occur and how wide it would need to be. So the condition's been amended to at that time it's fully designed, that if it's already built, the developer at their own expense would need to provide for that break to access the bike path.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Savay, I know we have a bunch of environmental folks here. Maybe we can start by addressing the environmental concerns that have been raised.
Sure. And what I think we ought to do first is there was concern about some of the toxics and whether they were studied or not, and then how much soil would be removed or not, and general remediation concerns. So why don't we start with Ken Price, and he's the gentleman that put together the report for the City of San Carlos. And then that report went to the County Department of Environmental Health for overview and oversight. And so we'll start with Mr. Price, and then we can go from there.
Oh,
Good evening.
I'm sorry, sir.
After he's done talking.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Ken Price. I'm with AWR. We did the environmental consulting on the project. And what I'd like to do is start at the beginning. Before any environmental investigation occurred or remediation was considered, we met with San Mateo County Environmental Health with a staffing meeting between the potential purchasers, City of San Carlos, the purchaser, the owner of the property, and myself and their brokers to determine who would take the responsible party position. Now, the responsible party position at that time would be the individual or entity that would assume and get into a memo of understanding with the county for payment of services that the county renders for the technical oversight of the project. And that was determined at that time to be the seller. Now, the seller is the responsible party only from that standpoint. They didn't do any contamination on the project. The project was contaminated by pyromet back in the 70s, 60s, 80s, somewhere back in that time. And in 1995, there was remediation performed at the site. Their volatile organic chemical underground storage tanks were removed, and those are the ones that contain the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, the TCE, and the other ones of concern were trans 1,2-dichloroethane, cis 1,2, vinyl chloride, a litany of volatile organic compounds that are in the monitoring reports that we've prepared. And that work continued until 2004, and at that point, the Regional Water Quality Control Board issued case closure with no further action, provided that if and when the project, the property, was to change ownership or to have a change in usage, then they would be notified to initiate additional investigation, because at the time it was closed knowing that contamination still existed in the soil and groundwater. Okay, so at that point we came in, and part of the memo of agreement with the county is to present them work plans that they approve on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. They look at it and they say, that's fine, but don't forget to do this and this, or either approve or modify. We then implement the plan, write a report, put conclusions and recommendations to the report, and then have them review it and come back and maybe do a subsequent report if we haven't totally defined the issue. So that's where we are at this point, where we've defined it and they approved the work that was done. We came up with a remedial action plan, which was not black box magic. It's a proven technology that's been used on many projects in the Bay Area, approved by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the DTSC, San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, Alameda County Environmental Health Departments, on cleaning up the same chemicals that are in the soil and groundwater at the landmark site. So it was approved and implemented, and it's a process that's going to take some time. It's different than the dig out and haul away, but in the reports that we prepared, We also indicated that upon demolition of the site and when grading begins, there will be the need to observe where these impacted soils are, and that can be determined visually and or with photoionization detectors, because these give off vapors and you can tell where they are. They can be dug out, hauled away to a proper landfill, not to somebody's backyard, but to a proper landfill, transported under chain of title to a landfill for disposal and taken care of at that point. So the remediation includes what we're doing now to clean up the groundwater. But if and when this project comes to fruition, the excavation and demolition would entail the removal of impacted soil.
Okay. Did you test for PCBs?
No, we did not.
And why not?
Because it was not a chemical of concern in the 1995 work that was done at the site prior when the regional board closed it. What we did is we took over the investigation of the VOCs, volatile organic compounds, which don't include PCBs, and did the work that was approved by the county.
Are you saying phospho-organic? Is that what the word you're using?
Volatile.
Volatile organic. Okay, thank you.
Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So no, we did not test for PCBs. I'm not saying they aren't there, but they were not in the historic record with Pyromet. And when we went through the record with the county, they looked at what historically had been prepared at the site in the past when Pyromet was the responsible party doing the work. And just an aside, the county tried to go after Pyromet to do more work after we came to the table to do the work, and Pyromet did not respond. Flat out did not respond. So anyway, we did not do PCBs, and those can be tested for or drilled for, but they were not part of the chemicals of concern that we evaluated at this site.
But they can be tested for.
Of course, of course. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us the difference between remediation and cleanup?
That's terminology. Remediation is usually used in our field to it's the 25-cent word. Instead of clean up, we're going to remediate the site. It's the high-tech term for cleanup. Since we don't have a lot of high-tech in our field, we do stuff with big augers and not refined equipment, so we use remediation as opposed to cleanup, but they both mean the same thing. And you clean it up or remediate it to a standard established by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, which would be environmental screening levels.
And would the standard be different for a commercial industrial site versus a residential site?
Yes, there are numerical values for cleanup under commercial industrial standards and also for residential standards.
And as this is a residential hotel, will this be cleaned up to a residential standard or a commercial industrial standard?
Well, it would appear to be cleaned up to, you can go to either a commercial industrial standard or a residential standard, or you can do a health risk analysis, because the commercial standards and the residential standards are very conservative in their preparation and analysis on how they got those numbers. So what can be done and what should be done is a health risk analysis of the site-specific conditions to determine exactly what the health risk is at that site, not from a table that was prepared in Sacramento or Southern California, but site-specific to where we are, knowing the conditions, the contaminants, and the concentrations we have.
And I'm going to look at staff and ask, will that be done?
I'm going to look at Ken and ask him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And when we'll get to that point when we begin to or if the demolition occurs, there'll be some soil dig out, because there still needs to be some soil vapor testing done. Because what these chemicals have are, they vaporize in the soil. And these vapors move through the soil, they migrate through the soil, they migrate through slabs, and this happens in the Silicon Valley. I mean, you know what's happened down there. In the past years, all the development occurred there. Now they've left and gone someplace else, and other people are using those buildings for different uses, and now having indoor air issues from the VOCs that are volatilizing through the soil and groundwater. So we'll take soil vapor samples from the soil to determine what the vapor concentration is, and there'll be vapor barriers designed in the building prior to the pouring of the slab to cap what material is left if we don't get it all out, so that there's no vapors coming into the building.
Except that you just said it would be cleaned up.
Well, it would be cleaned up, but okay, we're cleaning it up to a standard that's a health risk. I'm not being funny, but it'll never be cleaned up to the way the Ohlone Indians had it back in the day. I mean, that's an unfortunate reality, and I apologize for that. But we're doing what we can to be part of the county's standard and the regional board standard is to protect the waters of the state of California and the people therein. And so when we reach those standards that they have established, whether you agree with them or not, that's what we're doing.
Okay. Can you sort of elaborate on the difference between cleaning up soil and cleaning up water?
Yes. Water can be cleaned up by pumping and treating it, running it through carbon filtration systems, because carbon will absorb the VOCs out of the water, so the water gets cleaned up, then it can be disposed of into the storm system because it's been cleaned. Okay? Soil has to be dug out. You can't do it any other way. I mean, it can be aerated, and then what am I doing? I'm taking the contamination in the soil and throwing it in the air. So in the years past where you saw gas stations that had piles of dirt, then all of a sudden you saw these piles of dirt covered with plastic. Well, the plastic was a means of keeping the vapors from getting into the air. And then after a summer, the plastic would deteriorate and it wouldn't work. So the soil is dug out and hauled away, and the groundwater is pumped, or what we've done is done additives into the soil, into the groundwater. We're not cleaning the soil at this point. We're cleaning the groundwater, okay? And there was some questions about what will happen if the site gets floodwater on it. Will the floodwater get contaminated? No, it won't. Floodwater that runs on the surface does not impact or get touched by the groundwater that's down at 9 or 10 feet, I believe. It stays on itself and runs through the storm system that the city has established.
So you had mentioned that we were using cleanup methods that weren't black box magic or whatever the term was. Is there a name for the method that was used?
Yeah, it's, you want me to, okay. These are projects from Regenesis. They're a remediation supply company. We had 960 pounds of hydrogen release primer, 6,400 pounds of 3D microemulsified 3D ME, 2,400 pounds of chemical reducing solution, and 60 liters of Deloctor Plus DBI compounds. All these were mixed together, injected into the groundwater, after we had defined where the plume was. Now, the plume is this mass of contamination in the groundwater, and we found injection points, or located injection points, where the contamination is the hottest, moved it out to where it was the least, and injected this material. I think we injected, how many?
Not like a name for the process, but there's a host of things that you applied to it because of the specificity of it.
Bioremediation. We're adding material into the groundwater that will react with the chemicals and alter them and neutralize them. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't bioremediate the soil. You would need to dig the soil.
It would be dug out, because what you're looking for is in a cleanup or remediation, you remove the source. The source is the tank where the stuff was, the piping that brought the stuff to the tank. And when you dig the tank out, you may find some contamination around the tank. So you dig as much of that out as you can. Now, that happens at a gas station when the leak is fairly fresh and hasn't moved too far away. Here, we couldn't do that because the buildings were there. We couldn't dig any contamination out. And when they removed the tanks in '95, they didn't dig any soil out, or very, very little soil was dug out. So after it's dug out, then what you're doing, you're removing the major source, the tank, the piping, and impacted soil, and now you want to clean up the water, because what's left in the soil will slowly leach into the water, so you want to get as much soil out as you can, and then clean up the water.
So one of the terms that was used was a sludge pit, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. If I understand you correctly, one of those things, or whatever, and that's the term I'm not familiar with, but that's okay. Basically, we would haul the dirt out. Is what
The gentleman who was talking about a sludge pit, I understand what they are, and they exist, but not on this site.
Okay.
It's a pit where sludge is placed, whether it's waste coal fines from a coal plant, or from a PCB plant, or it's sludge. It contains everything under the sun that they just want to put in a big pile and cap over. But that sludge pit does not exist on our site.
But you haven't tested for PCBs.
That is correct. But there is no sludge pit. I mean, a pit isn't going to be something that's 3 foot by 3 foot. It's going to be fairly large. And with all the drilling we did on the site, we didn't hit anything that was reminiscent of that, nor was anything like that found in the record that we reviewed before we started the investigation from the prior work that was already closed by the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
And you would see that after you remove the buildings.
After we remove the buildings, we'll be able to get, well, because the investigation we did, which is standard, drills 2, 3, 4 inch diameter holes in the ground. We do get soil coming out of there, but to visualize what this looks like in its totality, those 3 inch holes aren't going to do much. But it gives you the ability to take samples at specific depths, analyze them for the chemicals of concern, and determine the concentration compounds and define a plume in the soil and groundwater so you know what you're going to clean up and how you're going to clean it up. You have to have a plan of attack before you could clean it up, and that's what we do with that investigation.
Is there special remediation that you use for PCBs if we find them, or what you're doing already would take care of them?
No, there'd be a special. It sounds like we'd probably have to do some additional adding to the groundwater if it was, or do some pumping, or if we find it there. I don't know if we're going to find it there. I mean, there's some contention that it's in the area, so we're going to have to determine what we have, how much we have, and come up with a plan at that time.
Okay.
The removal of the soil, how is that? How is the concern from the residents and the businesses in the area about contaminated soil going through the area addressed?
Well, I can address how it's removed from the ground, how it's placed in vehicles, and then from that point, there are specific trucks that carry the material that are covered, that don't leak. I'm sure you've seen gravel trucks on the road where they're dripping water out the tailgate. Well, this doesn't happen to these trucks. They're lined with a poly liner. They're closed so they don't blow in the air. And so the material is loaded from the site onto the trucks and then transported to a landfill under a manifest. And how it moves on city streets, I mean, that's up to you, not you singular, but you plural, to determine what that route is going to be. And then it's taken to landfill, and then it just keep digging until you find, I think the term is clean margins in the medical field. You're digging it out, you want clean margins so you know you've got as much out as you can. Or what you're leaving there is not going to be of a significant quantity to exacerbate the groundwater contamination. Because again, unfortunately, we're not going to get it all out down to the last microgram. That's just not.
But basically, in a nutshell, you put together a plan, you give it to environmental health. Environmental health tells you whether your plan is good enough. You then execute your plan. Environmental health makes sure that you do it the way you say you're doing it.
That's
right?
absolutely correct.
Okay, so why don't we bring environmental health up and see why it is they're not requiring PCBs to be tested for or removed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Tag team. I'm Greg Smith. I supervise all the water protection and land use programs for County Environmental Health.
And you're here with the Environmental Health Director?
Yes, I am, with Heather Forshee, the Environmental Health Director.
All right. So I'm sure you've gotten the sense, if not from today, the community is expressing a lot of concerns about PCBs. Their view is that there are PCBs all over the peninsula, specifically in San Carlos, that there should be testing for PCBs, and you'll find them, and then you should clean them up. And so what's the response to that?
I can tell you that there were PCBs tested for at this site back in 1995.
Okay.
I cannot speak to how complete of an area was tested, but I can tell you that the samples that they did collect and test in 1995 did not have any indication of PCBs, semi-volatile organic compounds, or pesticides.
Okay. Is it possible that from, was it 1995 when it was tested, could PCBs have moved from other locations to this site?
Doubtful. However, I can't tell you anything more about the coverage of those samples from 1995, about what of an area was covered.
Could environmental health, if it wanted, require the landowner to test for PCBs?
If we had no indication, we would have no legal way to do that.
Okay, so, I mean, your view is that you have no indication, so that you can't require them to test for PCBs?
That's correct.
All right.
Could we require it?
Well, that would be a question for Mr. Rubens, not for Mr. Smith.
Yeah, it's my opinion that the city of San Carlos does not have that level of jurisdiction to compel testing that the county of San Mateo or the state of California, who has exclusive jurisdiction over groundwater contamination. We don't have any jurisdiction over that. We might have some possible leeway in an acute situation like a spill. The fire department is responding. We need to feel that we feel compelled to protect public safety and file for a temporary restraining order or something like that. But these are regulated activities by the state of California, which we do not have jurisdiction. I'll use an analogy to the recent problems with that the city's experienced at Line 147. The CPUC has exclusive jurisdiction over pipelines. The NTSB has exclusive jurisdiction over investigations regarding pipeline failures. We're in the same situation here with groundwater and soil contamination.
Can I follow that up with a question? Even though the gentleman standing here said they were tested for in 1995, but he has no idea how complete that testing was. So there must have been some indication back in 1995 that there was the potential for PCBs on this site, and so they looked for them. Therefore, this would be a follow-up testing to that study that was done in 1995, just to do a more complete study.
Well, I think we're back to a jurisdictional question, Scott. Even though I may personally like the idea of thoroughly testing the site for PCBs, it's just a jurisdictional question. I don't think we have jurisdiction to compel that through a condition of approval or through the environmental impact report process. We just don't have that jurisdiction.
What if this is the city's property, right? What if we just voluntarily undertook at our own expense to test for PCBs? Could we do that?
Well, the city could potentially do that if they wanted to, but that's not part of the Planning Commission's decision-making process tonight.
Would it be part of the environmental impact report under one of the hazards?
I think if it were part of the process, it would be in the development and disposition agreement for the property, and there are some considerations regarding environmental conditions in that document, and I don't recall the specifics of it, but I don't think it's at that granular level where we're talking about what tests would be taken. It's just a general responsibility when the handoff occurs between the city and the developer for these issues.
So, Mr. Smith, what are you going to require that we do as far as to get this? What are the standards that you're going to use as far as requiring them to clean it up? To what standards? How are you going to oversee it? What's it going to look like when it's done?
Our standard for San Mateo County and oversight of these types of sites, we do require cleanup to a residential level for all properties, unless they agree to clean it up to a commercial industrial standard, and we require that they take a deed restriction against potential future residential use.
So in this particular instance, because we're considering this a residential use, right? So the county's going to require that it be cleaned up to a residential standard?
We require a residential standard in any case. However, the residential standard is based on a 30-year residence time for any individuals to be considered for a 1 in a million cancer risk. For commercial industrial, it considers the same people occupying the site or using the site for 25 years, residential 30 years. This is not what we would consider residential. This is a short-term stay.
So is commercial a stricter standard or a looser, less strict standard?
Yes.
The latter.
And
it's less strict, but not by much.
But not by much. Okay.
So you've reviewed their plan, and has Environmental Health approved it?
We've approved the actual remediation. That initial remediation has taken place. At this point, they're in a post-remedial action monitoring, a post-cleanup, initial cleanup attempt, monitoring to see how their remedy performs and how the chemicals of concern become reduced over time.
And if it doesn't reduce the levels that we find acceptable, then they need to do more?
That's correct.
And then it seems like after they remove the existing structures, they're going to test again. And then if they need to do more cleanup, they're going to have to do more cleanup?
That's correct.
Anybody have any other questions?
I don't think so.
Scott?
I guess one last question that I have is this idea that things get closed, and even though they haven't been cleaned up.
I think this was in relation to the Shell station. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, and so when I think of something being closed, I assume that it's been cleaned up, and you're saying that at least in relation to environmental items, closed doesn't necessarily mean cleaned up?
Case closure can be issued when the constituents, where they are or where they have any remote likelihood of migrating, can be reduced to the point where they are no further substantial risk to human health or the environment. Typically, substantial risk is considered for carcinogens a 1 in a million cancer risk. And all of these levels are dictated by the State Water Resources Control Board, US EPA, or Department of Toxic Substance Control. So between the feds and the state, they dictate what levels can remain in place given what situations.
Okay.
So one of the concerns that was expressed by one of the residents I spoke with was that that this construction is going to happen, that stuff's going to get stirred up, and then it's going to rain, and it's going to all flow out into the bay, and then the city of San Carlos is going to get fined. Any comment on that generalized concern?
That concern is unfounded for where the contamination resides, and how any remediation or any soil removal potential on the site would be handled. Any impacted site, any contaminated site that we deal with, before any digging begins, we require a soil and groundwater management plan that describes how they will excavate, how they will monitor the soil and groundwater, if any groundwater is going to have to be pumped, if any soil is going to be moved or removed, that be monitored, how it's going to be monitored, and then if they find something, how that will be dealt with. So we establish that up front. As to stirring it up, that would only happen if the contaminants were left at the surface, and in this case they are in the subsurface, or they would be removed.
What happens if they don't follow the plan that they've given you? How is that enforced?
In what way do you mean?
I mean, they give you a plan that they will do certain things if contamination is found, but then later on they decide, I'm just not going to do it.
We require, number one, that a registered professional who is putting their license on the line is signing for that and overseeing it. In this case, typically it would be a registered civil engineer or a professional geologist licensed in the state of California to have responsible charge of that work on the site. So they're putting their license on the line, and they have to document what they're doing and submit that to us.
I think the concern also was, well, what if they don't clean it up as well as they say they do, and then they build a hotel on top of it? Can that happen? What is environmental health going to do to prevent them from failing to clean it up as well as they promise?
It's written into, my understanding is it's written into the mitigation measures that we have to give approval for the building permit for that to go ahead. So
they can't build unless they clean it up?
They can't build unless they've cleaned it up to our satisfaction that they can build and it would not be an impact.
Okay.
So, two more things. Sure. The first is, and I know this is a really hard question, how do you deal with the unknown? So, you've got an industrial site. You never know what somebody has put on that site. You're cleaning up what you know, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there still isn't contamination there. So how do you go about looking for things that are sort of unknown when it comes to cleaning up these sites?
Environmental health does not require that. We get into the game when it comes to the point of there's a known impact, and they're looking to us for regulatory oversight of making sure that gets cleaned up appropriately. It's typically what happens is it's the banks who require that a site be evaluated. That's typically starts with what's called a phase 1, goes to a phase, that's record review, goes to a phase 2, which is subsurface evaluation, to find the things that may be on this site, because the banks don't want to lend on it if the case is that there's something there. I know that there was phase 1 and phase 2 investigation done on this, and that's how this contamination came to light again, seeing that it was slightly, it was concentrations that were not as was expected when we received case closure previously.
As part of that phase 1 and phase 2, did they only look for things that they sort of knew were there?
I don't know.
Who would know?
Ken Price can answer that question.
Please.
Yeah, the Phase 1 environmental site assessment is performed under an ASTM standard, American Society of Testing Materials, and it has a very detailed guideline of what one looks for in the investigative process. The Phase 1 has no sampling. It's going through records, it's going through aerial photos. Excuse me, what happened to the property in 1890, in 1870? Who was there? Who were the tenants? What tenants had what chemicals? What did they do? Looking in the fire department records for inspections, did they have good housekeeping? Did they regulate their materials correctly? Did they dispose of what they had to dispose of properly? Did they do all the protocol that's associated with the business that they were undertaking? Did they have a hazardous material maintenance plan into the fire department that identifies to the fire department what chemicals they have on site, so that in the event of a fire, the fire can be fought correctly, not with water when water is not appropriate? So that there is a protocol, and we look for everything that could be there, that's in the record. Because a lot of times, if you're going back to sites, done a lot of work in San Francisco, that the records going back pre-06 and late 1800s just don't really show what you have. You're going back to Sanborn maps, which are very useful, and they go back, and they're only on certain areas of cities that are older and have been developed, like San Francisco and San Jose. But you get out into some of the newer industrial areas of Silicon Valley, you aren't going to have those. But you do the record search that you can, and that leads you to a conclusionary statement that the potential for contamination existing at the site from past or present site-specific activity is high, medium, low, non-existent, don't worry about it. Okay, it's a verbalization of a potential. And those are called recognized environmental conditions, if we have one. So we have a recognized environmental condition. Now I need to see if that's a big recognized environmental condition. So we'll do some sampling. Soil sampling, water sampling, and just recently, not recently, last 5 years or so, soil vapor, indoor air, has become a recognized environmental condition. So we do look for everything, as much as we can, and as much as the record allows it, and trying to find employees or owners of the property that had some history of the site that we had to chase down. And we've done that. So we do everything we can to try to find the information necessary to get us back to square one.
So, any more environmental questions?
Just one more from staff, and that is that if the residents who presented today feel strongly about still testing for PCBs, that would be something that they would take up with the City Council.
And if from a policy standpoint, that is that could be a request that could be made to the City Council. But I think I was when the discussion was going on, I was just looking at the latest version of the disposition and development agreement, and the issue of environmental remediation on the site in the DDA is handled not at the level of what's going to be done, but the city would be, if the council approves it, would be selling the property as is. The developer's taking all the responsibility for future cleanup. So that was one question that came up earlier about the city being potentially liable. So that's taken care of in the DDA. There's a whole workup of what's going to happen with the site as far as environmental review as part of that. And there's a work plan that's referred to in it that specifies through the County Department of Environmental Health what's going to happen to the property. And I think the main point about the environmental cleanup of the site is, from I'm not an engineer or a chemist, but the cases I've seen about liability and responsibility for cleanup have all been, as has been stated, to the standard that the state sets for cleanup. So I'll give you an example. And now keep in mind, these sites are being used now. So there's presumably they've been determined, and I think they have been determined to be safe to be used currently, because otherwise there'd be a whole further enforcement action, because remember, there's the buildings that are on site are being used. But the enforcement goes to the standards that apply the county, in the cases, other cases I've had, the county and the state requires, at least this county requires to the residential use, unless, as was stated earlier, the property has a deed restriction that it will never become residential use, and that's the state has determined these are the safety levels for the property. So, to the extent that we don't believe that the environmental cleanup is sufficient, that's where the jurisdictional part comes in. The city doesn't have the expertise to deal with these issues. The city, because of the structure the state is set up to manage the cleanup of toxic groundwater and toxic soils, that we rely on as a city the standards that the state and the county, or the implementation by the county. And what we do, and this is what we do with all kinds of other conditions when there's another jurisdictional agency involved in the enforcement, is we put a condition of approval that they will satisfy all those requirements under state law. So that may not be a satisfactory response because people suspect there's more there. Right. And I think what you're getting to is, how do we make sure they thoroughly test this site? Right. We are relying on the state regulations and the county enforcement agency to do that for us. And we just don't have the ability to do anything other than rely on those, what in the judgment of these public officials is a thorough cleanup of the site.
So the residents that have the concerns then should appeal to the other agency?
Well, that would be, I suppose, one approach. And then the other is if, for example, a member of the public hypothetically thinks that the standards are insufficient, then that goes up to the state legislature to change the law, or the Water Quality Control Board to change the standards. And that's a whole administrative process. Maybe Commissioner Silverman knows exactly what that process is, and I know it takes a lot of time to change those standards, and they've been thoroughly debated at all levels of government. So I know that's people are naturally, I think, concerned about this. I don't want to give people the wrong impression that there isn't a concern about the history of these sites. But from a city standpoint, I'm the city attorney. I can tell you that jurisdictionally we cannot change those standards. We cannot impose a different standard. We can just say, state and county, do your job and make sure that the soil and groundwater are safe for humans to occupy the property. And I think that's, in all my experience with the County Department of Environmental Health, that's what they do. That's their job.
So our rules require us to adjourn at 10:30 unless there's a motion to extend the meeting. You want to extend it 15 minutes, wrap this up, and wrap it up for the day?
I move to extend the meeting 15 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So, Mr. Sauvé? Yes.
The other item on your agenda is time sensitive, as the businesses at that are requesting a use permit at 505 Corey need to move out of the landmark site as a part of this project. They've been given notice, and so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you could spare a few moments to hear that item after this item.
Okay. All right. Well, what are we going to do with this item, Mr. Sauvé?
Well, it's difficult to assemble so many consultants, based on schedule and everything. So what I would do is pick another key topic. I would say traffic is something that I've heard, and try and address that. Try and get through as much as you can this evening with the consultants that we have.
To what end? I mean, are you...
I think you try and get through as much as you can this evening with the consultants that we have. You gave yourself 15 minutes, I guess. I guess I would ask Ms. Sanders, how long do you think it'll take to get through the other item?
Be very brief.
Okay.
Can we skip to that one and then come back to this one?
Certainly.
All right. Well, then let's do that.
Can I start? Or do you need to introduce it?
Do you need a break?
No.
Through.
All right. Let's do it.
Thank you. There's two businesses currently located at 850 East San Carlos Avenue. That's Advanced Sports Performance and Society Skate Park. And they're requesting a conditional use permit for a commercial recreation facility at 505 Corey. The combined tenant space is 12,000 square feet with 14 parking spaces. It's near Affinity Badminton, Rock and Jumpin'. I have nothing further to add. You've read your staff report. The applicants are here if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for staff on this item?
I had two quick ones. The first one is attachment 1 and attachment 2 are identical. I'm wondering what we're missing.
It's two different conditional use permits. One's for the benefit of Advanced Sports and the other's for Society, but the conditions are identical.
Not missing anything.
Yeah,
Good.
I wanted to have them
Okay.
independent in case one were to move out.
So the second question,
Go ahead. I was just curious if there were any public comments received by staff on this item.
I have not received any public comments.
Okay.
It is a public hearing, though, so you may want to open that briefly.
I mean, we're still in the public hearing. We never closed it, but that's fine. I will have to take public comment if there is any. Does anyone have any other questions for staff?
parking spots.
Yes, there's 14 dedicated for this use.
Yes. How many at the existing site?
It's not really identified clearly, but based on several site inspections that I've conducted, less than 14 have been used. Society is more of a drop-off business. There's not a lot of people that stick around. They have very low employee use. And as well with Advanced Sports, it's kind of off-peak times from Society, so they do complement themselves very well. Okay. So I found that 14 would be more than sufficient for the two businesses.
Because it just seemed like if these are replacing what's at Pay's Place.
Well, they use two small tenant spaces at 850, so it's behind Pay's Place.
This is not the basketball.
Not at all. Absolutely not.
Not all the traffic that we see from that. This is the two smaller
tenants that are behind that facility. Yes.
Makes more sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here?
Both applicants are here. You want to just come up together? We'll be efficient.
Thank you for hanging out.
Yeah, no problem.
So I'm guessing he's Society, and I'm just kidding.
You don't know.
Is there anything you want to say?
No, just Mike Morales, and the owner of Advanced Sports Performance, a resident here, and hoping to get the permit passed.
All right. Anybody have any questions for the applicants? Is there anyone here who wants to do public comment on this item? Seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. I believe there's a motion on the last page of the page 4 of the report.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the request of do we want to close public comment, or do we care?
Okay.
Just keep doing it.
Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. So I move that the Planning Commission approve the request of Advanced Sports Performance and Society for conditional use permit approvals to allow 2 new commercial recreation facilities at 505 Quarry Road, APN 046-040320, based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, so that's done. So, Mr. Survey, back to the Landmark Hotel item. You would like us to hear from whom?
Well, I mean, you continued it for 15 minutes, I think, till
10:45.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get through enough in 10 minutes. So I'm retracting.
If there's someone here who you really don't think can come back that you would like us to hear from, I'm sure that the commission would be happy to extend the meeting longer. Well, happy is probably not the right word. Willing to extend the meeting longer. I don't want to inconvenience folks more than we already have. But, I mean, you're in a better position to judge that than I am.
No, I don't think that's the case.
Okay. So then do we continue this to a date certain?
Yes.
And is there a date certain that staff has in mind?
July 6th, the next Planning Commission meeting date.
Can I have a motion to continue this matter to July 6th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, matters continued to July 6th.
Scott, next time I'm going to follow my gut and switch the agenda like I said in the beginning.
So, report on recent city council actions.
None this evening.
Planning Commission comments or reports.
I don't have anything.
Any correspondence other than that that's already been included in the record?
None other than that, except to note that Paul Manginetti did drop off a packet. We'll make copies for the commission and make sure that's in your packet next time.
Thank you. Any planning staff comments, reports, and updates of current projects?
None of this evening. We'll see you on July 6th.
All right, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.